The Happy Hunter and the Skillful Fisher. Long, long ago, Japan was governed by Hohodemi, the fourth Mikoto, or Augustness, in descent from the illustrious Amaterasu, the sun goddess. He was not only as handsome as his ancestress was beautiful, but he was also very strong and brave, and was famous for being the greatest hunter in the land. Because of his matchless skill as a hunter, he was called Yamasachi Hiko, or the Happy Hunter of the Mountains. His elder brother was a very skillful fisher, and as he far surpassed all rivals in fishing, he was named Umisachi Hiko, or the Skillful Fisher of the Sea. The brothers thus led happy lives, thoroughly enjoying their respective occupations, and the days passed quickly and pleasantly while each pursued his own way, the one hunting and the other fishing. One day the happy hunter came to his brother, the skillful fisher, and said, "Well, my brother, I see you go to the sea every day with your fishing rod in your hand, and when you return you come laden with fish. And as for me, it is my pleasure to take my bow and arrow, and to hunt the wild animals up the mountains and down in the valleys. For a long time we have each followed our favorite occupation, so that now we must both be tired, you of your fishing and I of my hunting. Would it not be wise for us to make a change? Will you try hunting in the mountains, and I will go and fish in the sea?" The skillful fisher listened in silence to his brother, and for a moment was thoughtful, but at last he answered, "Oh yes, why not? Your idea is not a bad one at all. Give me your bow and arrow, and I will set out at once for the mountains and hunt for game." So the matter was settled by this talk, and the two brothers each started out to try the other's occupation, little dreaming of all that would happen. It was very unwise of them, for the happy hunter knew nothing of fishing, and the skillful fisher, who was bad-tempered, knew as much about hunting. The happy hunter took his brother's much-prized fishing hook and rod and went down to the seashore and sat down on the rocks. He baited his hook and then threw it into the sea clumsily. He sat and gazed at the little float bobbing up and down in the water, and longed for a good fish to come and be caught. Every time the buoy moved a little, he pulled up his rod, but there was never a fish at the end of it, only the hook and the bait. If he had known how to fish properly, he would have been able to catch plenty of fish. But although he was the greatest hunter in the land, he could not help being the most bungling fisher. The whole day passed in this way, while he sat on the rocks holding the fishing rod and waiting in vain for his luck to turn. At last the day began to darken, and the evening came. Still he had caught not a single fish. Drawing up his line for the last time before going home, he found that he had lost his hook without even knowing when he had dropped it. He now began to feel extremely anxious, for he knew that his brother would be angry at his having lost his hook, for, it being his only one, he valued it above all other things. The happy hunter now set to work to look among the rocks and on the sand for the lost hook, and while he was searching to and fro, his brother, the skillful fisher, arrived on the scene. He had failed to find any game while hunting that day, and was not only in a bad temper, but looked fearfully cross. When he saw the happy hunter searching about on the shore, he knew that something must have gone wrong, so he said at once, "What are you doing, my brother?" The happy hunter went forward timidly, for he feared his brother's anger, and said, "Oh, my brother, I have indeed done badly." "What is the matter? What have you done?" asked the elder brother impatiently. "I have lost your precious fishing hook." While he was still speaking, his brother stopped him and cried out fiercely, "Lost my hook! It is just what I expected. For this reason, when you first proposed your plan of changing over our occupations, I was really against it, but you seemed to wish it so much that I gave in and allowed you to do as you wished. The mistake of our trying unfamiliar tasks is soon seen, and you have done badly. I will not return you your bow and arrow till you have found my hook. Look to it that you find it and return it to me quickly." The happy hunter felt that he was to blame for all that had come to pass, and bore his brother's scornful scolding with humility and patience. He hunted everywhere for the hook most diligently, but it was nowhere to be found. He was at last obliged to give up all hope of finding it. He then went home, and in desperation broke his beloved sword into pieces and made 500 hooks out of it. He took these to his angry brother and offered them to him, asking his forgiveness, and begging him to accept them in the place of the one he had lost for him. It was useless. His brother would not listen to him, much less grant his request. The happy hunter then made another 500 hooks and again took them to his brother, beseeching him to pardon him. "Though you make 1,000,000 hooks," said the skillful fisher, shaking his head, "they are of no use to me. I cannot forgive you unless you bring me back my own hook." Nothing would appease the anger of the skillful fisher, for he had a bad disposition and had always hated his brother because of his virtues. And now, with the excuse of the lost fishing hook, he planned to kill him and to usurp his place as ruler of Japan. The happy hunter knew all this full well, but he could say nothing, for being the younger he owed his elder brother obedience. So he returned to the seashore and once more began to look for the missing hook. He was much cast down, for he had lost all hope of ever finding his brother's hook now. While he stood on the beach, lost in perplexity and wondering what he had best do next, an old man suddenly appeared carrying a stick in his hand. The happy hunter afterwards remembered that he did not see from whence the old man came, neither did he know how he was there. He happened to look up and saw the old man coming towards him. "You are Hohudemi, the augustness, sometimes called the happy hunter, are you not?" asked the old man. "What are you doing alone in such a place?" "Yes, I am he," answered the unhappy young man. "Unfortunately, while fishing, I lost my brother's precious fishing hook. I have hunted this shore all over, but alas, I cannot find it, and I am very troubled, for my brother won't forgive me till I restore it to him. But who are you?" "My name is Shiwozuchino Okina, and I live nearby on this shore." "I am sorry to hear what misfortune has befallen you. You must indeed be anxious. But if I tell you what I think, the hook is nowhere here. It is either at the bottom of the sea or in the body of some fish who has swallowed it. And for this reason, though you spend your whole life in looking for it here, you will never find it." "Then what can I do?" asked the distressed man. "You had better go down to Ringu and tell Rin-Jin, the Dragon King of the Sea, what your trouble is, and ask him to find the hook for you. I think that would be the best way." "Your idea is a splendid one," said the happy hunter, "but I fear I cannot get to the Sea King's realm, for I have always heard that it is situated at the bottom of the sea." "Oh, there will be no difficulty about your getting there," said the old man. "I can soon make something for you to ride on through the sea." "Thank you," said the happy hunter. "I shall be very grateful to you if you will be so kind." The old man at once set to work, and soon made a basket and offered it to the happy hunter. He received it with joy, and taking it to the water, mounted it and prepared to start. He bade good-bye to the kind old man who had helped him so much, and told him that he would certainly reward him as soon as he found his hook and could return to Japan without fear of his brother's anger. The old man pointed out the direction he must take, and told him how to reach the realm of Ringu, and watched him ride out to sea on the basket, which resembled a small boat. The happy hunter made all the haste he could, riding on the basket which had been given him by his friend. His queer boat seemed to go through the water of its own accord, and the distance was much shorter than he had expected, for in a few hours he caught sight of the gate and the roof of the Sea King's palace. And what a large place it was, with its numberless sloping roofs and gables, its huge gateways, and its grey stone walls. He soon landed, and leaving his basket on the beach, he walked up to the large gateway. The pillars of the gate were made of beautiful red coral, and the gate itself was adorned with glittering gems of all kinds. Large katsura trees overshadowed it. Our hero had often heard of the wonders of the Sea King's palace beneath the sea, but all the stories he had ever heard fell short of the reality which he now saw for the first time. The happy hunter would have liked to enter the gate there and then, but he saw that it was fast closed, and also that there was no one about whom he could ask to open it for him. So he stopped to think what he should do. In the shade of the trees before the gate, he noticed a well full of fresh spring water. Surely someone would come out to draw water from the well sometime, he thought. Then he climbed into the tree overhanging the well and seated himself to rest on one of the branches and waited for what might happen. Ere long he saw the huge gate swing open, and two beautiful women came out. Now the Mikoto, Augustness, had always heard that Ringu was the realm of the Dragon King under the sea, and had naturally supposed that the place was inhabited by dragons and similar terrible creatures, so that when he saw these two lovely princesses, whose beauty would be rare, even in the world from which he had just come, he was exceedingly surprised and wondered what it could mean. He said not a word, however, but silently gazed at them through the foliage of the trees, waiting to see what they would do. He saw that in their hands they carried golden buckets. Slowly and gracefully, in their trailing garments, they approached the well, standing in the shade of the katsura trees, and were about to draw water, all unknowing of the stranger who was watching them, for the happy hunter was quite hidden among the branches of the tree where he had posted himself. As the two ladies leaned over the side of the well to let down their golden buckets, which they did every day in the year, they saw reflected in the deep, still water the face of a handsome youth gazing at them from amidst the branches of the tree in whose shade they stood. Never before had they seen the face of mortal man. They were frightened and drew back quickly with their golden buckets in their hands. Their curiosity, however, soon gave them courage, and they glanced timidly upwards to see the cause of the unusual reflection. And then they beheld the happy hunter sitting in the tree, looking down at them with surprise and admiration. They gazed at him face to face, but their tongues were still with wonder and could not find a word to say to him. When the Mikoto saw that he was discovered, he sprang down lightly from the tree and said, "I am a traveller, and as I was very thirsty, I came to the well in the hopes of quenching my thirst, but I could find no bucket with which to draw the water. So I climbed into the tree, much vexed, and waited for someone to come. Just at that moment, while I was thirstily and impatiently waiting, you noble ladies appeared, as if in answer to my great need. Therefore I pray you of your mercy, give me some water to drink, for I am a thirsty traveller in a strange land." His dignity and graciousness overruled their timidity, and bowing in silence, they both once more approached the well, and letting down their golden buckets, drew up some water and poured it into a jewelled cup and offered it to the stranger. He received it from them with both hands, raising it to the height of his forehead in token of high respect and pleasure, and then drank the water quickly, for his thirst was great. When he had finished his long draught, he set the cup down on the edge of the well, and drawing his short sword, he cut off one of the strange curved jewels, Magatama, a necklace of which hung round his neck and fell over his breast. He placed the jewel in the cup and returned it to them and said, bowing deeply, This is a token of my thanks." The two ladies took the cup, and looking into it to see what he had put inside, for they did not yet know what it was, they gave a start of surprise, for there lay a beautiful gem at the bottom of the cup. No ordinary mortal would give away a jewel so freely. "Will you not honor us by telling us who you are?" said the elder damsel. "Certainly," said the happy hunter. "I am Hohodemi, the fourth Mikoto, also called in Japan the happy hunter." "Are you indeed Hohodemi, the grandson of Amaterasu, the sun goddess?" asked the damsel who had spoken first. "I am the eldest daughter of Rinjin, the king of the sea, and my name is Princess Tayotama." "And," said the younger maiden, who at last found her tongue, "I am her sister, the Princess Tamayori." "Are you indeed the daughters of Rinjin, the king of the sea? I cannot tell you how glad I am to meet you," said the happy hunter. And without waiting for them to reply, he went on. "The other day I went fishing with my brother's hook and dropped it. How, I am sure I can't tell. As my brother prizes his fishing hook above all his other possessions, this is the greatest calamity that could have befallen me. Unless I find it again, I can never hope to win my brother's forgiveness, for he is very angry at what I have done. I have searched for it many, many times, but I cannot find it. Therefore I am much troubled. While I was hunting for the hook, in great distress, I met a wise old man, and he told me that the best thing I could do was to come to Ringu and to Rinjin, the dragon king of the sea, and ask him to help me. This kind old man also showed me how to come. Now you know how it is. I am here, and why. I want to ask Rinjin if he knows where the lost hook is. Will you be so kind as to take me to your father? And do you think he will see me?" asked the happy hunter anxiously. Princess Tayotama listened to this long story, and then said, "Not only is it easy for you to see my father, but he will be much pleased to meet you. I am sure he will say that good fortune has befallen him, that so great and noble a man as you, the grandson of Amaterasu, should come down to the bottom of the sea." And then turning to her younger sister, she said, "Do you not think so, Tamayori?" "Yes, indeed," answered the Princess Tamayori, in her sweet voice. "As you say, we can know no greater honor than to welcome the Mikoto to our home." "Then I ask you to be so kind as to lead the way," said the happy hunter. "Condescend to enter, Mikoto Augustness," said both the sisters, and bowing low, they led him through the gate. The younger princess left her sister to take charge of the happy hunter, and going faster than they, she reached the Sea King's palace first, and running quickly to her father's room, she told him of all that had happened to them at the gate, and that her sister was even now bringing the Augustness to him. The dragon king of the sea was much surprised at the news, for it was but seldom, perhaps only once in several hundred years, that the Sea King's palace was visited by mortals. Rinjin at once clapped his hands and summoned all his courtiers and the servants of the palace and the chief fish of the sea together, and solemnly told them that the grandson of the sun goddess Amaterasu was coming to the palace, and that they must be very ceremonious and polite in serving the august visitor. He then ordered them all to the entrance of the palace to welcome the happy hunter. Rinjin then dressed himself in his robes of ceremony and went out to welcome him. In a few moments, the Princess Tayotama and the happy hunter reached the entrance, and the Sea King and his wife bowed to the ground and thanked him for the honor he did them in coming to see them. The Sea King then led the happy hunter to the guest room, and placing him in the uppermost seat, he bowed respectfully before him and said, "I am Rinjin, the dragon king of the sea, and this is my wife. Condescend to remember us forever." "Are you indeed Rinjin, the king of the sea?" of whom I have so often heard," answered the happy hunter, saluting his host most ceremoniously. "I must apologize for all the trouble I am giving you by my unexpected visit." And he bowed again and thanked the Sea King. "You need not thank me," said Rin-Jin. "It is I who must thank you for coming. Although the Sea Palace is a poor place, as you see, I shall be highly honored if you will make us a long visit." There was much gladness between the Sea King and the happy hunter, and they sat and talked for a long time. At last the Sea King clapped his hands, and then a huge retinue of fishes appeared, all robed in ceremonial garments, and bearing in their fins various trays on which all kinds of sea delicacies were served. A great feast was now spread before the king and his royal guest. All the fishes in waiting were chosen from amongst the finest fish in the sea. So, you can imagine what a wonderful array of sea creatures it was that waited upon the happy hunter that day. All in the palace tried to do their best to please him, and to show him that he was a much-honored guest. During the long repast, which lasted for hours, Rin-Jin commanded his daughters to play some music, and the two princesses came in and performed on the keoto, the Japanese harp, and sang and danced in turns. The time passed so pleasantly that the happy hunter seemed to forget his trouble and why he had come at all to the Sea King's realm, and he gave himself up to the enjoyment of this wonderful place, the land of fairy fishes. Who has ever heard of such a marvelous place? But the Mikoto soon remembered what had brought him to Ringu, and said to his host, "Perhaps your daughters have told you, King Rin-Jin, that I have come here to try and recover my brother's fishing hook, which I lost while fishing the other day. May I ask you to be so kind as to inquire of all your subjects if any of them have seen a fishing hook lost in the sea?" "Certainly," said the obliging Sea King. "I will immediately summon them all here and ask them." As soon as he had issued his command, the octopus, the cuttlefish, the bonito, the oxtail fish, the eel, the jellyfish, the shrimp, and the plaice, and many other fishes of all kinds, came in and sat down before Rin-Jin their king, and arranged themselves and their fins in order. Then the Sea King said solemnly, "Our visitor who is sitting before you all is the august grandson of Amaterasu. His name is Hohodemi, the fourth Augustness, and he is also called the Happy Hunter of the Mountains. While he was fishing the other day upon the shore of Japan, someone robbed him of his brother's fishing hook. He has come all this way down to the bottom of the sea to our kingdom, because he thought that one of you fishes may have taken the hook from him. Mischievous play. If any of you have done so, you must immediately return it. Or if any of you know who the thief is, you must at once tell us his name and where he is now." All the fishes were taken by surprise when they heard these words, and could say nothing for some time. They sat looking at each other and at the Dragon King. At last the cuttlefish came forward and said, "I think the Tai, the red bream, must be the thief who has stolen the hook." "Where is your proof?" asked the king. "Since yesterday evening the Tai has not been able to eat anything, and he seems to be suffering from a bad throat. For this reason I think the hook may be in his throat." "You had better send for him at once." All the fish agreed to this, and said, "It is certainly strange that the Tai is the only fish who has not obeyed your summons. Will you send for him and inquire into the matter? Then our innocence will be proved." "Yes," said the Sea King. "It is strange that the Tai has not come, for he ought to be the first to be here. Send for him at once." Without waiting for the king's order, the cuttlefish had already started for the Tai's dwelling, and he now returned, bringing the Tai with him. He led him before the king. The Tai sat there looking frightened and ill. He certainly was in pain, for his usually red face was pale, and his eyes were nearly closed and looked but half their usual size. "Answer, O Tai!" cried the Sea King. "Why did you not come in answer to my summons today?" "I have been ill since yesterday," answered the Tai. "That is why I could not come." "Don't say another word," cried out Rinjin angrily. "Your illness is the punishment of the gods for stealing the Mikoto's hook." "It is only too true," said the Tai. "The hook is still in my throat, and all my efforts to get it out have been useless. I can't eat, and I can scarcely breathe, and each moment I feel that it will choke me, and sometimes it gives me great pain. I had no intention of stealing the Mikoto's hook. I heedlessly snapped at the bait which I saw in the water, and the hook came off and stuck in my throat. So I hope you will pardon me." The cuttlefish now came forward and said to the king, "What I said was right. You see? The hook still sticks in the TAI's throat. I hope to be able to pull it out in the presence of the Mikoto, and then we can return it to him safely." "Oh, please make haste and pull it out," cried the Tai pitifully, for he felt the pains in his throat coming on again. "I do so want to return the hook to the Mikoto." "All right, Tai-san," said his friend, the cuttlefish. And then, opening the TAI's mouth as wide as he could, and putting one of his feelers down the TAI's throat, he quickly and easily drew the hook out of the sufferer's large mouth. He then washed it and brought it to the king. Rinjin took the hook from his subject, and then respectfully returned it to the happy hunter, the Mikoto, or Augustness the fishes called him, who was overjoyed at getting back his hook. He thanked Rinjin many times, his face beaming with gratitude, and said that he owed the happy ending of his quest to the Sea King's wise authority and kindness. Rinjin now desired to punish the Tai, but the happy hunter begged him not to do so, since his lost hook was thus happily recovered. He did not wish to make more trouble for the poor Tai. It was indeed the Tai who had taken the hook, but he had already suffered enough for his fault, if fault it could be called. What had been done was done in heedlessness and not by intention. The happy hunter said he blamed himself. If he had understood how to fish properly, he would never have lost his hook, and therefore all this trouble had been caused in the first place by his trying to do something which he did not know how to do. So he begged the Sea King to forgive his subject. Who could resist the pleading of so wise and compassionate a judge? Rinjin forgave his subject at once at the request of his august guest. The Tai was so glad that he shook his fins for joy, and he and all the other fish went out from the presence of their king, praising the virtues of the happy hunter. Now that the hook was found, the happy hunter had nothing to keep him in Ringu, and he was anxious to get back to his own kingdom and to make peace with his angry brother, the skillful fisher. But the Sea King, who had learnt to love him, and would fain have kept him as a son, begged him not to go so soon, but to make the sea palace his home as long as ever he liked. While the happy hunter was still hesitating, the two lovely princesses, Tayotama and Tamayori, came, and with the sweetest of bows and voices joined with their father in pressing him to stay, so that without seeming ungracious he could not say them nay, and was obliged to stay on for some time. Between the sea realm and the earth there was no difference in the night of time, and the happy hunter found that 3 years went fleeting quickly by in this delightful land. The years pass swiftly when anyone is truly happy. But though the wonders of that enchanted land seemed to be new every day, and though the Sea King's kindness seemed rather to increase than to grow less with time, the happy hunter grew more and more homesick as the days passed, and he could not repress a great anxiety to know what had happened to his home and his country and his brother while he had been away. So at last he went to the Sea King and said, "My stay with you here has been most happy, and I am very grateful to you for all your kindness to me. But I govern Japan, and, delightful as this place is, I cannot absent myself forever from my country. I must also return the fishing hook to my brother, and ask his forgiveness for having deprived him of it for so long. I am indeed very sorry to part from you, but this time it cannot be helped. With your gracious permission, I will take my leave today. I hope to make you another visit some day. Please give up the idea of my staying longer now." King Rhine-Jin was overcome with sorrow at the thought that he must lose his friend who had made a great diversion in the Palace of the Sea, and his tears fell fast as he answered, "We are indeed very sorry to part with you, Mikoto, for we have enjoyed your stay with us very much. You have been a noble and honored guest, and we have heartily made you welcome. I quite understand that as you govern Japan, you ought to be there and not here, and that it is vain for us to try and keep you longer with us, much as we would like to have you stay. I hope you will not forget us. Strange circumstances have brought us together, and I trust the friendship thus begun between the land and the sea will last and grow stronger than it has ever been before." When the Sea King had finished speaking, he turned to his 2 daughters and bade them bring him the 2 tied jewels of the sea. The 2 princesses bowed low, rose and glided out of the hall. In a few minutes they returned, each one carrying in her hands a flashing gem which filled the room with light. As the happy hunter looked at them, he wondered what they could be. The Sea King took them from his daughters and said to his guest, "These 2 valuable talismans we have inherited from our ancestors from time immemorial. We now give them to you as a parting gift in token of our great affection for you. These 2 gems are called the Nanju and the Kanju." The happy hunter bowed low to the ground and said, "I can never thank you enough for all your kindness to me. And now will you add one more favor to the rest and tell me what these jewels are and what I am to do with them?" "The Nanju," answered the Sea King, "is also called the Jewel of the Flood Tide, and whoever holds it in his possession can command the sea to roll in and to flood the land at any time that he wills. The Kanju is also called the Jewel of the Ebbing Tide, and this gem controls the sea and the waves thereof, and will cause even a tidal wave to recede." Then Rinjin showed his friend how to use the talismans one by one and handed them to him. The happy hunter was very glad to have these 2 wonderful gems, the Jewel of the Flood Tide and the Jewel of the Ebbing Tide, to take back with him, for he felt that they would preserve him in case of danger from enemies at any time. After thanking his kind host again and again, he prepared to depart. The Sea King and the 2 princesses, Tayotama and Tamayori, and all the inmates of the palace came out to say goodbye. And before the sound of the last farewell had died away, the happy hunter passed out from under the gateway, past the well of happy memory standing in the shade of the great Katsura trees on his way to the beach. Here he found, instead of the queer basket on which he had come to the realm of Ringu, a large crocodile waiting for him. Never had he seen such a huge creature. It measured 8 fathoms in length from the tip of its tail to the end of its long mouth. The Sea King had ordered the monster to carry the happy hunter back to Japan. Like the wonderful basket which Shiwotsuchi no Okina had made, it could travel faster than any steamboat, and in this strange way, riding on the back of a crocodile, the happy hunter returned to his own land. As soon as the crocodile landed him, the happy hunter hastened to tell the skillful fisher of his safe return. He then gave him back the fishing hook, which had been found in the mouth of the Tai, and which had been the cause of so much trouble between them. He earnestly begged his brother's forgiveness, telling him all that had happened to him in the Sea King's palace, and what wonderful adventures had led to the finding of the hook. Now, the skillful fisher had used the lost hook as an excuse for driving his brother out of the country. When his brother had left him that day 3 years ago, and had not returned, he had been very glad in his evil heart, and had at once usurped his brother's place as ruler of the land, and had become powerful and rich. Now, in the midst of enjoying what did not belong to him, and hoping that his brother might never return to claim his rights, quite unexpectedly, there stood the happy hunter before him. The skillful fisher feigned forgiveness, for he could make no more excuses for sending his brother away again. But in his heart he was very angry and hated his brother more and more, till at last he could no longer bear the sight of him day after day, and planned and watched for an opportunity to kill him. One day, when the happy hunter was walking in the rice fields, his brother followed him with a dagger. The happy hunter knew that his brother was following him to kill him, and he felt that now, in this hour of great danger, was the time to use the jewels of the flow and ebb of the tide and prove whether what the Sea King had told him was true or not. So he took out the jewel of the flood tide from the bosom of his dress and raised it to his forehead. Instantly, over the fields and over the farms, the sea came rolling in, wave upon wave, till it reached the spot where his brother was standing. The skillful fisher stood amazed and terrified to see what was happening. In another minute he was struggling in the water and calling on his brother to save him from drowning. The happy hunter had a kind heart, and could not bear the sight of his brother's distress. He at once put back the jewel of the flood tide and took out the jewel of the ebb tide. No sooner did he hold it up as high as his forehead than the sea ran back, and ere long the tossing, rolling floods had vanished, and the farms and fields and dry land appeared as before. The skillful fisher was very frightened at the peril of death in which he had stood, and was greatly impressed by the wonderful things he had seen his brother do. He learned now that he was making a fatal mistake to set himself against his brother, younger than he thought he was, for he now had become so powerful that the sea would flow in and the tide ebb at his word of command. So he humbled himself before the happy hunter and asked him to forgive him all the wrong he had done him. The skillful fisher promised to restore his brother to his rights, and also swore that though the happy hunter was the younger brother, and owed him allegiance by right of birth, that he, the skillful fisher, would exalt him as his superior and bow before him as lord of all Japan. Then the happy hunter said that he would forgive his brother if he would throw into the receding tide all his evil ways. The skillful fisher promised, and there was peace between the two brothers. From this time he kept his word and became a good man and a kind brother. The happy hunter now ruled his kingdom without being disturbed by family strife, and there was peace in Japan for a long, long time. Above all the treasures in his house, he prized the wonderful jewels of the flow and ebb of the tide, which had been given him by Rin-Jin, the Dragon King of the Sea. This is the congratulatory ending of The Happy Hunter and the Skillful Fisher. The Jellyfish and the Monkey. Long, long ago in old Japan, the kingdom of the sea was governed by a wonderful king. He was called Rin-Jin, or the Dragon King of the Sea. His power was immense, for he was the ruler of all sea creatures, both great and small. And in his keeping were the jewels of the ebb and flow of the tide. The jewel of the ebbing tide, when thrown into the ocean, caused the sea to recede from the land. And the jewel of the flowing tide made the waves to rise mountains high and to flow in upon the shore, like a tidal wave. The palace of Rin-Jin was at the bottom of the sea, and was so beautiful that no one has ever seen anything like it, even in dreams. The walls were of coral, the roof of jade stone and chrysoprase, and the floors were of the finest mother of pearl. But the Dragon King, in spite of his wide-spreading kingdom, his beautiful palace and all its wonders, and his power which none disputed throughout the whole sea, was not at all happy, for he reigned alone. At last he thought that if he married he would not only be happier but also more powerful. So he decided to take a wife. Calling all his fish retainers together, he chose several of them as ambassadors to go through the sea and seek for a young dragon princess who would be his bride. At last they returned to the palace, bringing with them a lovely young dragon. Her scales were of glittering green like the wings of summer beetles. Her eyes threw out glances of fire, and she was dressed in gorgeous robes. All the jewels of the sea worked in with embroidery adorned them. The king fell in love with her at once, and the wedding ceremony was celebrated with great splendor. Every living thing in the sea, from the great whales down to the little shrimps, came in shoals to offer their congratulations to the bride and bridegroom and to wish them a long and prosperous life. Never had there been such an assemblage or such gay festivities in the fish world before. The train of bearers who carried the bride's possessions to her new home seemed to reach across the waves from one end of the sea to the other. Each fish carried a phosphorescent lantern and was dressed in ceremonial robes, gleaming blue and pink and silver, and the waves as they rose and fell and broke that night seemed to be rolling masses of white and green fire, for the phosphorus shone with double brilliancy in honor of the event. Now for a time the Dragon King and his bride lived very happily. They loved each other dearly, and the bridegroom day after day took delight in showing his bride all the wonders and treasures of his coral palace. And she was never tired of wandering with him through its vast halls and gardens. Life seemed to them both like a long summer's day. 2 months passed in this happy way, and then the Dragon Queen fell ill and was obliged to stay in bed. The king was sorely troubled when he saw his precious bride so ill, and at once sent for the fish doctor to come and give her some medicine. He gave special orders to the servants to nurse her carefully and to wait upon her with diligence. But, in spite of all the nurse's assiduous care and the medicine that the doctor prescribed, the young queen showed no signs of recovery, but grew daily worse. Then the Dragon King interviewed the doctor and blamed him for not curing the queen. The doctor was alarmed at Rinjin's evident displeasure, and excused his want of skill by saying that although he knew the right kind of medicine to give the invalid, it was impossible to find it in the sea. "Do you mean to tell me that you can't get the medicine here?" asked the Dragon King. "It is just as you say," said the doctor. "Tell me what it is you want for the queen," demanded Rinjin. "I want the liver of a live monkey," answered the doctor. "The liver of a live monkey. Of course, that will be most difficult to get," said the king. "If we could only get that for the queen, Her Majesty would soon recover," said the doctor. "Very well, that decides it. We must get it somehow or other." "But where are we most likely to find a monkey?" asked the king. Then the doctor told the Dragon King that some distance to the south there was a monkey island where a great many monkeys lived. "If only you could capture one of these monkeys," said the doctor. "How can any of my people capture a monkey?" said the Dragon King, greatly puzzled. "The monkeys live on dry land, while we live in the water, and out of our element we are quite powerless. I don't see what we can do." "That has been my difficulty too," said the doctor. "But amongst your innumerable servants, you surely can find one who can go on shore for that express purpose." "Something must be done," said the king, and calling his chief steward, he consulted him on the matter. The chief steward thought for some time, and then, as if struck by a sudden thought, said joyfully, "I know what we must do. There is the courage. Jellyfish. He is certainly ugly to look at, but he is proud of being able to walk on land with his 4 legs like a tortoise. Let us send him to the island of monkeys to catch one." The jellyfish was then summoned to the king's presence and was told by his majesty what was required of him. The jellyfish, on being told of the unexpected mission which was to be entrusted to him, looked very troubled, and said that he had never been to the island in question, and as he had never had any experience in catching monkeys, he was afraid that he would not be able to get one. "Well," said the chief steward, "if you depend on your strength or dexterity, you will never catch a monkey. The only way is to play a trick on one." "How can I play a trick on a monkey?" "I don't know how to do it," said the perplexed jellyfish. "This is what you must do," said the wily chief steward. "When you approach the island of monkeys and meet some of them, you must try to get very friendly with one. Tell him that you are a servant of the Dragon King, and invite him to come and visit you and see the Dragon King's palace. Try and describe to him as vividly as you can the grandeur of the palace and the wonders of the sea, so as to arouse his curiosity and make him long to see it all." "But how am I to get the monkey here? You know monkeys don't swim," said the reluctant jellyfish. "You must carry him on your back." "What is the use of your shell if you can't do that?" said the chief steward. "Won't he be very heavy?" queried Courage again. "You mustn't mind that, for you are working for the Dragon King," replied the chief steward. "I will do my best then," said the jellyfish, and he swam away from the palace and started off towards the monkey island. Swimming swiftly, he reached his destination in a few hours, and landed by a convenient wave upon the shore. On looking round, he saw, not far away, a big pine tree with drooping branches, and on one of those branches was just what he was looking for, a live monkey. "I'm in luck," thought the jellyfish. "Now I must flatter the creature and try to entice him to come back with me to the palace, and my part will be done." So the jellyfish slowly walked towards the pine tree. In those ancient days, the jellyfish had 4 legs and a hard shell like a tortoise. When he got to the pine tree, he raised his voice and said, "How do you do, Mr. Monkey? Isn't it a lovely day?" "A very fine day," answered the monkey from the tree. "I have never seen you in this part of the world before. Where have you come from, and what is your name?" "My name is Courage, or Jellyfish. I am one of the servants of the Dragon King. I have heard so much of your beautiful island that I have come on purpose to see it," answered the jellyfish. "I am very glad to see you," said the monkey. "By the by," said the jellyfish, "have you ever seen the palace of the Dragon King of the Sea where I live?" "I have often heard of it, but I have never seen it," answered the monkey. "Then you ought most surely to come. It is a great pity for you to go through life without seeing it. The beauty of the palace is beyond all description. It is certainly to my mind the most lovely place in the world," said the jellyfish. "Is it so beautiful as all that?" asked the monkey in astonishment. Then the jellyfish saw his chance, and went on describing to the best of his ability the beauty and grandeur of the Sea King's palace, and the wonders of the garden with its curious trees of white, pink, and red coral, and the still more curious fruits like great jewels hanging on the branches. The monkey grew more and more interested, and as he listened, he came down the tree step by step so as not to lose a word of the wonderful story. "I have got him at last," thought the jellyfish, but aloud he said, "Mr. Monkey, I must now go back. As you have never seen the palace of the Dragon King, won't you avail yourself of this splendid opportunity by coming with me? I shall then be able to act as guide and show you all the sights of the sea, which will be even more wonderful to you, a landlubber." "I should love to go," said the monkey, "but how am I to cross the water?" I can't swim, as you surely know. There is no difficulty about that. I can carry you on my back." "That will be troubling you too much," said the monkey. "I can do it quite easily. I am stronger than I look, so you needn't hesitate," said the jellyfish, and taking the monkey on his back, he stepped into the sea. "Keep very still, Mr. Monkey," said the jellyfish. "You mustn't fall into the sea. I am responsible for your safe arrival at the king's palace." "Please don't go so fast, or I am sure I shall fall off," said the monkey. Thus they went along, the jellyfish skimming through the waves with the monkey sitting on his back. When they were about halfway, the jellyfish, who knew very little of anatomy, began to wonder if the monkey had his liver with him or not. "Mr. Monkey, tell me, have you such a thing as a liver with you?" The monkey was very much surprised at this queer question, and asked what the jellyfish wanted with a liver. "That is the most important thing of all," said the stupid jellyfish. "So as soon as I recollected it, I asked you if you had yours with you." "Why is my liver so important to you?" asked the monkey. "Oh, you will learn the reason later," said the jellyfish. The monkey grew more and more curious and suspicious, and urged the jellyfish to tell him for what his liver was wanted, and ended up by appealing to his hearer's feelings by saying that he was very troubled at what he had been told. Then the jellyfish, seeing how anxious the monkey looked, was sorry for him and told him everything. How the Dragon Queen had fallen ill, and how the doctor had said that only the liver of a live monkey would cure her, and how the Dragon King had sent him to find one. "Now I have done as I was told, and as soon as we arrive at the palace, the doctor will want your liver, so I feel sorry for you," said the silly jellyfish. The poor monkey was horrified when he learnt all this, and very angry at the trick played upon him. He trembled with fear at the thought of what was in store for him. But the monkey was a clever animal, and he thought it the wisest plan not to show any sign of the fear he felt. So he tried to calm himself and to think of some way by which he might escape. "The doctor means to cut me open and then take my liver out. Why, I shall die," thought the monkey. At last a bright thought struck him, so he said quite cheerfully to the jellyfish, "What a pity it was, Mr. Jellyfish, that you did not speak of this before we left the island. If I had told why I wanted you to accompany me, you would certainly have refused to come," answered the jellyfish. "You are quite mistaken," said the monkey. "Monkeys can very well spare a liver or two, especially when it is wanted for the Dragon Queen of the Sea. If I had only guessed of what you were in need, I should have presented you with one without waiting to be asked. I have several livers, but the greatest pity is that as you did not speak in time, I have left all my livers hanging on the pine tree." "Have you left your liver behind you?" asked the jellyfish. "Yes," said the cunning monkey. "During the daytime, I usually leave my liver hanging up on the branch of a tree, as it is very much in the way when I am climbing about from tree to tree. Today, listening to your interesting conversation, I quite forgot it, and left it behind when I came off with you. If only you had spoken in time, I should have remembered it, and should have brought it along with me." The jellyfish was very disappointed when he heard this, for he believed every word the monkey said. The monkey was of no good without a liver. Finally the jellyfish stopped and told the monkey so. "Well," said the monkey, "that is soon remedied. I am really sorry to think of all your trouble, but if you will only take me back to the place where you found me, I shall soon be able to get my liver." The jellyfish did not at all like the idea of going all the way back to the island again, but the monkey assured him that if he would be so kind as to take him back, he would get his very best liver and bring it with him the next time. Thus persuaded, the jellyfish turned his course towards the monkey island once more. No sooner had the jellyfish reached the shore than the sly monkey landed, and getting up into the pine tree where the jellyfish had first seen him, he cut several capers amongst the branches with joy at being safe. Home again, and then looking down at the jellyfish said, "So many thanks for all the trouble you have taken. Please present my compliments to the Dragon King on your return." The jellyfish wondered at this speech and the mocking tone in which it was uttered. Then he asked the monkey if it wasn't his intention to come with him at once after getting his liver. The monkey replied laughingly that he couldn't afford to lose his liver. It was too precious. "But remember your promise," pleaded the jellyfish, now very discouraged. "That promise was false, and anyhow it is now broken," answered the monkey. Then he began to jeer at the jellyfish and told him that he had been deceiving him the whole time, that he had no wish to lose his life, which he certainly would have done had he gone on to the Sea King's palace to the old doctor waiting for him, instead of persuading the jellyfish to return under false pretenses. "Of course I won't give you my liver, but come and get it if you can," added the monkey mockingly from the tree. There was nothing for the jellyfish to do now but to repent of his stupidity, and to return to the Dragon King of the Sea, and to confess his failure. So he started sadly and slowly to swim back. The last thing he heard as he glided away, leaving the island behind him, was the monkey laughing at him. Meanwhile, the Dragon King, the doctor, the chief steward, and all the servants were waiting impatiently for the return of the jellyfish. When they caught sight of him approaching the palace, they hailed him with delight. They began to thank him profusely for all the trouble he had taken in going to Monkey Island, and then they asked him where the monkey was. Now the day of reckoning had come for the jellyfish. He quaked all over as he told his story, how he had brought the monkey halfway over the sea, and then had stupidly let out the secret of his commission, how the monkey had deceived him by making him believe that he had left his liver behind him. The Dragon King's wrath was great, and he at once gave orders that the jellyfish was to be severely punished. The punishment was a horrible one. All the bones were to be drawn out from his living body, and he was to be beaten with sticks. The poor jellyfish, humiliated and horrified beyond all words, cried out for pardon, but the Dragon King's order had to be obeyed. The servants of the palace forthwith each brought out a stick and surrounded the jellyfish, and after pulling out his bones, they beat him to a flat pulp, and then took him out beyond the palace gates and threw him into the water. Here he was left to suffer and repent his foolish chattering, and to grow accustomed to his new state of bonelessness. From this story it is evident that in former times the jellyfish once had a shell and bones, something like a tortoise. But ever since the Dragon King's sentence was carried out on the ancestor of the jellyfishes, his descendants have all been soft and boneless, just as you see them today thrown up by the waves high upon the shores of Japan. The Ogre of Rashomon long, long ago in Kyoto, the people of the city were terrified by accounts of a dreadful ogre who, it was said, haunted the gate of Rashomon at twilight and seized whoever passed by. The missing victims were never seen again, so it was whispered that the ogre was a horrible cannibal who not only killed the unhappy victims but ate them also. Now everybody in the town and neighborhood was in great fear, and no one durst venture out after sunset near the gate of Rashomon. Now, at this time there lived in Kyoto a general named Raiko, who had made himself famous for his brave deeds. Some time before this he made the country ring with his name, for he had attacked Oyama, where a band of ogres lived with their chief, who instead of wine drank the blood of human beings. He had routed them all and cut off the head of the chief monster. This brave warrior was always followed by a band of faithful knights. In this band there were 5 knights of great valor. One evening, as the 5 knights sat at a feast quaffing sake in their rice bowls and eating all kinds of fish, raw and stewed and broiled, and toasting each other's healths and exploits, the first knight, Hojo, said to the others, "Have you all heard the rumor that every evening after sunset there comes an ogre to the gate of Rashomon, and that he seizes all who pass by?" The second knight, Watanabe, answered him, saying, "Do not talk such nonsense. All the ogres were killed by our chief Raiko at Oyama. It cannot be true, because even if any ogres did escape from that great killing, they would not dare to show themselves in this city, for they know that our brave master would at once attack them if he knew that any of them was still alive. Then do you disbelieve what I say, and think that I am telling you a falsehood?" "No, I do not think that you are telling a lie," said Watanabe, "but you have heard some old woman's story which is not worth believing." "Then the best plan is to prove what I say by going there yourself and finding out yourself whether it is true or not," said Hojo. Watanabe, the second knight, could not bear the thought that his companion should believe he was afraid, so he answered quickly, "Of course, I will go at once and find out for myself." So Watanabe at once got ready to go. He buckled on his long sword and put on a coat of armor and tied on his large helmet. When he was ready to start, he said to the others, "Give me something so that I can prove I have been there." Then one of the men got a roll of writing paper and his box of Indian ink and brushes, and the 4 comrades wrote their names on a piece of paper. "I will take this," said Watanabe, "and put it on the gate of Rashomon, so tomorrow morning will you all go and look at it? I may be able to catch an ogre or 2 by then." And he mounted his horse and rode off gallantly. It was a very dark night, and there was neither moon nor star to light Watanabe on his way. To make the darkness worse, a storm came on. The rain fell heavily, and the wind howled like wolves in the mountains. Any ordinary man would have trembled at the thought of going out of doors, but Watanabe was a brave warrior and dauntless, and his honor and word were at stake, so he sped on into the night, while his companions listened to the sound of his horse's hoofs dying away in the distance, then shut the sliding shutters close and gathered round the charcoal fire and wondered what would happen, and whether their comrade would encounter one of those horrible oni. At last Watanabe reached the gate of Rashomon, but peer as he might through the darkness he could see no sign of an ogre. "It is just as I thought," said Watanabe to himself. "There are certainly no ogres here. It is only an old woman's story. I will stick this paper on the gate so that the others can see. I have been here when they come tomorrow, and then I will take my way home and laugh at them all." He fastened a piece of paper, signed by all his 4 companions, on the gate, and then turned his horse's head towards home. As he did so, he became aware that someone was behind him, and at the same time a voice called out to him to wait. Then his helmet was seized from the back. "Who are you?" said Watanabe fearlessly. He then put out his hand and groped around to find out who or what it was that held him by the helmet. As he did so, he touched something that felt like an arm. It was covered with hair and as big round as the trunk of a tree. Watanabe knew at once that this was the arm of an ogre, so he drew his sword and cut at it fiercely. There was a loud yell of pain, and then the ogre dashed in front of the warrior. Watanabe's eyes grew large with wonder, for he saw that the ogre was taller than the great gate. His eyes were flashing like mirrors in the sunlight, and his huge mouth was wide open, and as the monster breathed, flames of fire shot out of his mouth. The ogre thought to terrify his foe, but Watanabe never flinched. He attacked the ogre with all his strength, and thus they fought face to face for a long time. At last, the ogre, finding that he could neither frighten nor beat Watanabe, and that he might himself be beaten, took to flight. But Watanabe, determined not to let the monster escape, put spurs to his horse and gave chase. But though the knight rode very fast, the ogre ran faster, and to his disappointment he found himself unable to overtake the monster, who was gradually lost to sight. Watanabe returned to the gate where the fierce fight had taken place and got down from his horse. As he did so, he stumbled upon something lying on the ground. Stooping to pick it up, he found that it was one of the ogre's huge arms, which he must have slashed off in the fight. His joy was great at having secured such a prize, for this was the best of all proofs of his adventure with the ogre. So he took it up carefully and carried it home as a trophy of his victory. When he got back, he showed the arm to his comrades, who one and all called him the hero of their band and gave him a great feast. His wonderful deed was soon noised abroad in Kyoto, and people from far and near came to see the ogre's arm. Watanabe now began to grow uneasy as to how he should keep the arm in safety, for he knew that the ogre to whom it belonged was still alive. He felt sure that one day or other, as soon as the ogre got over his scare, he would come to try to get his arm back again. Watanabe therefore had a box made of the strongest wood and banded with iron. In this he placed the arm, and then he sealed down the heavy lid, refusing to open it for anyone. He kept the box in his own room and took charge of it himself, never allowing it out of his sight. Now one night he heard someone knocking at the porch, asking for admittance. When the servant went to the door to see who it was, there was only an old woman, very respectable in appearance. On being asked who she was, and what was her business, the old woman replied with a smile that she had been nurse to the master of the house when he was a little baby. If the lord of the house were at home, she begged to be allowed to see him. The servant left the old woman at the door and went to tell his master that his old nurse had come to see him. Watanabe thought it strange that she should come at that time of night, but at the thought of his old nurse, who had been like a foster mother to him, and whom he had not seen for a long time, a very tender feeling sprang up for her in his heart. He ordered the servant to show her in. The old woman was ushered into the room, and after the customary bows and greetings were over, she said, "Master, the report of your brave fight with the ogre at the gate of Rashomon is so widely known that even your poor old nurse has heard of it. Is it really true, what everyone says, that you cut off one of the ogre's arms? If you did, your deed is highly to be praised." "I was very disappointed," said Watanabe, "that I was not able to take the monster captive, which was what I wished to do, instead of only cutting off an arm." "I am very proud to think," answered the old woman, "that my master was so brave as to dare to cut off an ogre's arm. There is nothing that can be compared to your courage. Before I die, it is the great wish of my life to see this arm," she added pleadingly. "No," said Watanabe, "I am sorry, but I cannot grant your request." "But why?" asked the old woman. "Because," replied Watanabe, "ogres are very revengeful creatures, and if I open the box, there is no telling but that the ogre may suddenly appear and carry off his arm. I have had a box made on purpose with a very strong lid, and in this box I keep the ogre's arm secure, and I never show it to anyone, whatever happens." "Your precaution is very reasonable," said the old woman, "but I am your old nurse, so surely you will not refuse to show me the arm. I have only just heard of your brave act, and not being able to wait till the morning, I came at once to ask you to show it to me." Watanabe was very troubled at the old woman's pleading, but he still persisted in refusing. Then the old woman said, "Do you suspect me of being a spy sent by the ogre?" "No, of course I do not suspect you of being the ogre's spy, for you are my old nurse," answered Watanabe. "Then you cannot surely refuse to show me the arm any longer," entreated the old woman, "for it is the great wish of my heart to see for once in my life the arm of an ogre." Watanabe could not hold out in his refusal any longer, so he gave in at last, saying, "Then I will show you the ogre's arm, since you so earnestly wish to see it. Come, follow me." And he led the way to his own room, the old woman following. When they were both in the room, Watanabe shut the door carefully, and then going towards a big box which stood in a corner of the room, he took off the heavy lid. He then called to the old woman to come near and look in, for he never took the arm out of the box. "What is it like?" "Let me have a good look at it," said the old nurse with a joyful face. She came nearer and nearer, as if she were afraid, till she stood right against the box. Suddenly she plunged her hand into the box and seized the arm, crying with a fearful voice which made the room shake, "Oh, joy! I have got my arm back again!" And from an old woman, she was suddenly transformed into the towering figure of the frightful ogre. Watanabe sprang back and was unable to move for a moment, so great was his astonishment. But recognizing the ogre who had attacked him at the gate of Rashomon, he determined with his usual courage to put an end to him this time. He seized his sword, drew it out of its sheath in a flash, and tried to cut the ogre down. So quick was Watanabe that the creature had a narrow escape. But the ogre sprang up to the ceiling and, bursting through the roof, disappeared in the mist and clouds. In this way the ogre escaped with his arm. The knight gnashed his teeth with disappointment, but that was all he could do. He waited in patience for another opportunity to dispatch the ogre. But the latter was afraid of Watanabe's great strength and daring, and never troubled Kyoto again. So once more the people of the city were able to go out without fear even at night time, and the brave deeds of Watanabe have never been forgotten. The Quarrel of the Monkey and the Crab. Long, long ago, one bright autumn day in Japan, it happened that a pink-faced monkey and a yellow crab were playing together along the bank of a river. As they were running about, the crab found a rice dumpling, and the monkey a persimmon seed. The crab picked up the rice dumpling and showed it to the monkey, saying, "Look what a nice thing I have found." Then the monkey held up his persimmon seed and said, "I also have found something good. Look." Now, though the monkey is always very fond of persimmon fruit, he had no use for the seed he had just found. The persimmon seed is as hard and uneatable as a stone. He, therefore, in his greedy nature, felt very envious of the crab's nice dumpling, and he proposed an exchange. The crab naturally did not see why he should give up his prize for a hard stone-like seed, and would not consent to the monkey's proposition. Then the cunning monkey began to persuade the crab, saying, "How unwise you are not to think of the future! Your rice dumpling can be eaten now, and is certainly much bigger than my seed. But if you sow this seed in the ground, it will soon grow and become a great tree in a few years, and bear an abundance of fine, ripe persimmons year after year. If only I could show it to you then, with the yellow fruit hanging on its branches. Of course, if you don't believe me, I shall sow it myself, though I am sure later on you will be very sorry that you did not take my advice." The simple-minded crab could not resist the monkey's clever persuasion. He at last gave in and consented to the monkey's proposal, and the exchange was made. The greedy monkey soon gobbled up the dumpling, and with great reluctance gave up the persimmon seed to the crab. He would have liked to keep that too, but he was afraid of making the crab angry, and of being pinched by his sharp scissor-like claws. They then separated, the monkey going home to his forest trees, and the crab to his stones along the riverside. As soon as the crab reached home, he put the persimmon seed in the ground, as the monkey had told him. In the following spring, the crab was delighted to see the shoot of a young tree push its way up through the ground. Each year it grew bigger, till at last it blossomed one spring, and in the following autumn bore some fine large persimmons. Among the broad, smooth green leaves the fruit hung like golden balls, and as they ripened, they mellowed to a deep orange. It was the little crab's pleasure to go out day by day and sit in the sun and put out his long eyes in the same way as a snail puts out its horn, and watch the persimmons ripening to perfection. "How delicious they will be to eat," he said to himself. At last, one day, he knew the persimmons must be quite ripe, and he wanted very much to taste one. He made several attempts to climb the tree, in the vain hope of reaching one of the beautiful persimmons hanging above him, but he failed each time. For a crab's legs are not made for climbing trees, but only for running along the ground and over stones, both of which he can do most cleverly. In his dilemma he thought of his old playmate, the monkey, who, he knew, could climb trees better than anyone else in the world. He determined to ask the monkey to help him, and set out to find him. Running crab fashion up the stony riverbank, over the pathways into the shadowy forest, the crab at last found the monkey taking an afternoon nap in his favorite pine tree, with his tail curled tight around a branch to prevent him from falling off in his dreams. He was soon wide awake, however, when he heard himself called, and eagerly listening to what the crab told him. When he heard that the seed which he had long ago exchanged for a rice dumpling had grown into a tree and was now bearing good fruit, he was delighted, for he at once devised a cunning plan which would give him all the persimmons for himself. He consented to go with the crab to pick the fruit for him. When they both reached the spot, the monkey was astonished to see what a fine tree had sprung from the seed, and with what a number of ripe persimmons the branches were loaded. He quickly climbed the tree and began to pluck and eat, as fast as he could, one persimmon after another. Each time he chose the best and ripest he could find, and went on eating till he could eat no more. Not one would he give to the poor hungry crab waiting below, and when he had finished there was little but the hard, unripe fruit left. You can imagine the feelings of the poor crab after waiting patiently, for so long as he had done, for the tree to grow and the fruit to ripen. When he saw the monkey devouring all the good persimmons, he was so disappointed that he ran round and round the tree, calling to the monkey to remember his promise. The monkey at first took no notice of the crab's complaints, but at last he picked out the hardest, greenest persimmon he could find and aimed it at the crab's head. The persimmon is as hard as stone when it is unripe. The monkey's missile struck home, and the crab was sorely hurt by the blow. Again and again, as fast as he could pick them, the monkey pulled off the hard persimmons and threw them at the defenseless crab till he dropped dead, covered with wounds all over his body. There he lay, a pitiful sight, at the foot of the tree he had himself planted. When the wicked monkey saw that he had killed the crab, he ran away from the spot as fast as he could, in fear and trembling, like a coward as he was. Now the crab had a son who had been playing with a friend not far from the spot where this sad work had taken place. On the way home he came across his father dead, in a most dreadful condition. His head was smashed and his shell broken in several places, and around his body lay the unripe persimmons which had done their deadly work. At this dreadful sight, the poor young crab sat down and wept. But when he had wept for some time, he told himself that this crying would do no good. It was his duty to avenge his father's murder, and this he determined to do. He looked about for some clue which would lead him to discover the murderer. Looking up at the tree, he noticed that the best fruit had gone, and that all around lay bits of peel and numerous seeds strewn on the ground, as well as the unripe persimmons which had evidently been thrown at his father. Then he understood that the monkey was the murderer, for he now remembered that his father had once told him the story of the rice dumpling and the persimmon seed. The young crab knew that monkeys liked persimmons above all other fruit, and he felt sure that his greed for the coveted fruit had been the cause of the old crab's death. Alas! He at first thought of going to attack the monkey at once, for he burned with rage. Second thoughts, however, told him that this was useless, for the monkey was an old and cunning animal and would be hard to overcome. He must meet cunning with cunning and ask some of his friends to help him, for he knew it would be quite out of his power to kill him alone. The young crab set out at once to call on the mortar, his father's old friend, and told him of all that had happened. He besought the mortar with tears to help him avenge his father's death. The mortar was very sorry when he heard the woeful tale, and promised at once to help the young crab punish the monkey to death. He warned him that he must be very careful in what he did, for the monkey was a strong and cunning enemy. The mortar now sent to fetch the bee and the chestnut, also the crab's old friends, to consult them about the matter. In a short time the bee and the chestnut arrived. When they were told all the details of the old crab's death and of the monkey's wickedness and greed, they both gladly consented to help the young crab in his revenge. After talking for a long time as to the ways and means of carrying out their plans, they separated, and Mr. separated. Mortar went home with the young crab to help him bury his poor father. While all this was taking place, the monkey was congratulating himself, as the wicked often do before their punishment comes upon them, on all he had done so neatly. He thought it quite a fine thing that he had robbed his friend of all his ripe persimmons, and then that he had killed him. Still, smile as hard as he might, he could not banish altogether the fear of the consequences should his evil deeds be discovered. If he were found out, and he told himself that this could not be, for he had escaped unseen. The crab's family would be sure to bear him hatred and seek to take revenge on him. So he would not go out, and kept himself at home for several days. He found this kind of life, however, extremely dull, accustomed as he was to the free life of the woods, and at last he said, "No one knows that it was I who killed the crab. I am sure that the old thing breathed his last before I left him. Dead crabs have no mouths. Who is there to tell that I am the murderer? Since no one knows, what is the use of shutting myself up and brooding over the matter? What is done cannot be undone." With this, he wandered out into the crab settlement and crept about as slyly as possible near the crab's house and tried to hear the neighbors' gossip round about. He wanted to find out what the crabs were saying about their chief's death, for the old crab had been the chief of the tribe. But he heard nothing and said to himself, "They are all such fools that they don't know and don't care who murdered their chief." Little did he know, in his so-called monkey's wisdom, that this seeming unconcern was part of the young crab's plan. He purposely pretended not to know who killed his father, and also to believe that he had met his death through his own fault. By this means he could the better keep secret the revenge on the monkey which he was meditating. So the monkey returned home from his walk quite content. He told himself he had nothing now to fear. One fine day, when the monkey was sitting at home, he was surprised by the appearance of a messenger from the young crab. While he was wondering what this might mean, the messenger bowed before him and said, "I have been sent by my master to inform you that his father died the other day in falling from a persimmon tree while trying to climb the tree after fruit. This Being the 7th day is the first anniversary after his death, and my master has prepared a little festival in his father's honor, and bids you come to participate in it as you were one of his best friends. My master hopes you will honor his house with your kind visit." When the monkey heard these words, he rejoiced in his inmost heart, for all his fears of being suspected were now at rest. He could not guess that a plot had just been set in motion against him. He pretended to be very surprised at the news of the crab's death, and said, "I am indeed very sorry to hear of your chief's death. We were great friends, as you know. I remember that we once exchanged a rice dumpling for a persimmon seed. It grieves me much to think that that seed was in the end the cause of his death. I accept your kind invitation with many thanks. I shall be delighted to do honor to my poor old friend." And he screwed some false tears from his eyes. The messenger laughed inwardly and thought, "The wicked monkey is now dropping false tears, but within a short time he shall shed real ones." But aloud he thanked the monkey politely and went home. When he had gone, the wicked monkey laughed aloud at what he thought was the young crab's innocence, and, without the least feeling, began to look forward to the feast to be held that day in honor of the dead crab to which he had been invited. He changed his dress and set out solemnly to visit the young crab. He found all the members of the crab's family and his relatives waiting to receive and welcome him. As soon as the bows of meeting were over, they led him to a hall. Here the young chief mourner came to receive him. Expressions of condolence and thanks were exchanged between them, and then they all sat down to a luxurious feast and entertained the monkey as the guest of honor. The feast over, he was next invited to the tea ceremony room to drink a cup of tea. When the young crab had conducted the monkey to the tea room, he left him and retired. Time passed, and still he did not return. At last the monkey became impatient. He said to himself, "This tea ceremony is always a very slow affair. I am tired of waiting so long. I am very thirsty after drinking so much sake at the dinner." He then approached the charcoal fireplace and began to pour out some hot water from the kettle boiling there, when something burst out from the ashes with a great pop and hit the monkey right in the neck. It was the chestnut, one of the crab's friends, who had hidden himself in the fireplace. The monkey, taken by surprise, jumped backward and then started to run out of the room. The bee, who was hiding outside the screens, now flew out and stung him on the cheek. The monkey was in great pain. His neck was burned by the chestnut and his face badly stung by the bee. But he ran on screaming and chattering with rage. Now the stone mortar had hidden himself with several other stones on the top of the crab's gate, and as the monkey ran underneath, the mortar and all fell down on the top of the monkey's head. Was it possible for the monkey to bear the weight of the mortar falling on him from the top of the gate? He lay crushed and in great pain, quite unable to get up. As he lay there helpless, the young crab came up, and, holding his great claw scissors over the monkey, he said, "Do you now remember that you murdered my father? Then you are my enemy?" gasped the monkey brokenly. "Of course," said the young crab. "It was your father's fault, not mine," gasped the unrepentant monkey. "Can you still lie? I will soon put an end to your breath." And with that he cut off the monkey's head with his pitcher claws. Thus the wicked monkey met his well-merited punishment, and the young crab avenged his father's death. This is the end of the story of the monkey, the crab, and the persimmon seed. The Sagacious, Monkey, and the Boar. Long, long ago, there lived in the province of Shinshin in Japan a traveling monkey man who earned his living by taking round a monkey and showing off the animal's tricks. One evening, the man came home in a very bad temper and told his wife to send for the butcher the next morning. The wife was very bewildered and asked her husband, "Why do you wish me to send for the butcher? It's no use taking that monkey round any longer. He's too old and forgets his tricks. I beat him with my stick all I know how, but he won't dance properly. I must now sell him to the butcher and make what money out of him I can. There is nothing else to be done." The woman felt very sorry for the poor little animal and pleaded for her husband to spare the monkey, but her pleading was all in vain. The man was determined to sell him to the butcher. Now the monkey was in the next room and overheard every word of the conversation. He soon understood that he was to be killed, and he said to himself, "Barbarous indeed is my master. Here I have served him faithfully for years, and instead of allowing me to end my days comfortably and in peace, he is going to let me be cut up by the butcher. And my poor body is to be roasted and stewed and eaten? Woe is me! What am I to do? Ah, a bright thought has struck me. There is, I know, a wild boar living in the forest nearby. I have often heard tell of his wisdom. Perhaps if I go to him and tell him the strait I am in, he will give me his counsel. I will go and try." There was no time to lose. The monkey slipped out of the house and ran as quickly as he could to the forest to find the boar. The boar was at home, and the monkey began his tale of woe at once. "Good Mr. Boar, I have heard of your excellent wisdom. I am in great trouble. You alone can help me. I have grown old in the service of my master, and because I cannot dance properly now, he intends to sell me to the butcher. What do you advise me to do? I know how clever you are." The boar was pleased at the flattery and determined to help the monkey. He thought for a little while and then said, "Hasn't your master a baby?" "Oh, yes," said the monkey. "He has one infant son." "Doesn't it lie by the door in the morning when your mistress begins the work of the day? Well, I will come round early, and when I see my opportunity, I will seize the child and run off with it." "What then?" said the monkey. "Why, the mother will be in a tremendous scare, and before your master and mistress know what to do, you must run after me and rescue the child and take it home safely to its parents. And you will see that when the butcher comes, they won't have the heart to sell you." The monkey thanked the boar many times and then went home. He did not sleep much that night, as you may imagine, for thinking of the morrow. His life depended on whether the boar's plan succeeded or not. He was the first up, waiting anxiously for what was to happen. It seemed to him a very long time before his master's wife began to move about and open the shutters to let in the light of day. Then all happened as the boar had planned. The mother placed her child near the porch as usual while she tidied up the house and got her breakfast ready. The child was crooning happily in the morning sunlight, dabbing on the mats at the play of light and shadow. Suddenly there was a noise in the porch and a loud cry from the child. The mother ran out from the kitchen to the spot, only just in time to see the boar disappearing through the gate with her child in its clutch. She flung out her hands with a loud cry of despair and rushed into the inner room where her husband was still sleeping soundly. He sat up slowly and rubbed his eyes, and crossly demanded what his wife was making all that noise about. By the time that the man was alive to what had happened, and they both got outside the gate, the boar had got well away, but they saw the monkey running after the thief as hard as his legs would carry him. Both the man and wife were moved to admiration at the plucky conduct of the sagacious monkey, and their gratitude knew no bounds when the faithful monkey brought the child safely back to their arms. "There," said the wife, "this is the animal you want to kill. If the monkey hadn't been here, we should have lost our child forever." "You are right, wife, for once," said the man as he carried the child into the house. You may send the butcher back when he comes, and now give us all a good breakfast and the monkey too." When the butcher arrived, he was sent away with an order for some boar's meat for the evening dinner. And the monkey was petted and lived the rest of his days in peace, nor did his master ever strike him again. The Shinnensha, or the south-pointing carriage. The compass, with its needle always pointing to the north, is quite a common thing, and no one thinks that it is remarkable now, though when it was first invented it must have been a wonder. Now, long ago in China, there was a still more wonderful invention called the Shinnensha. This was a kind of chariot, with the figure of a man on it, always pointing to the south. No matter how the chariot was placed, the figure always wheeled about and pointed to the south. This curious instrument was invented by Kote, one of the 3 Chinese emperors of the mythological age. Kote was the son of the Emperor Yuhi. Before he was born, his mother had a vision which foretold that her son would be a great man. One summer evening she went out to walk in the meadows, to seek the cool breezes which blow at the end of the day, and to gaze with pleasure at the star-lit heavens above her. As she looked at the North Star, strange to relate, it shot forth vivid flashes of lightning in every direction. Soon after this, her son Kote came into the world. Kote in time grew to manhood and succeeded his father, the Emperor Yuhi. His early reign was greatly troubled by the rebel Shiyu. This rebel wanted to make himself king, and many were the battles which he fought to this end. Shiyu was a wicked magician. His head was made of iron, and there was no man that could conquer him. At last, Kote declared war against the rebel and led his army to battle, and the 2 armies met on a plain called Takuroku. The emperor boldly attacked the enemy, but the magician brought down a dense fog upon the battlefield, and while the royal army were wandering about in confusion, trying to find their way, Shiyu retreated with his troops, laughing at having fooled the royal army. No matter however strong and brave the emperor's soldiers were, the rebel with his magic could always escape in the end. Kote returned to his palace and thought and pondered deeply as to how he should conquer the magician, for he was determined not to give up yet. After a long time, he invented the Shinnensha with the figure of a man always pointing south, for there were no compasses in those days. With this instrument to show him the way, he need not fear the dense fogs raised up by the magician to confound his men. Kote again declared war against Shiyu. He placed the Shinnensha in front of his army and led the way to the battlefield. The battle began in earnest. The rebel was being driven backward by the royal troops when he again resorted to magic, and upon his saying some strange words in a loud voice, immediately a dense fog came down upon the battlefield. But this time no soldier minded the fog. Not one was confused. Kote, by pointing to the Shinnensha, could find his way, and directed the army without a single mistake. He closely pursued the rebel army, and drove them backward till they came to a big river. This river Kote and his men found was swollen by the floods and impossible to cross. Shiyu, by using his magic art, quickly passed over with his army and shut himself up in a fortress on the opposite bank. When Kote found his march checked, he was wild with disappointment, for he had very nearly overtaken the rebel when the river stopped him. He could do nothing, for there were no boats in those days, so the emperor ordered his tent to be pitched in the pleasantest spot that the place afforded. One day he stepped forth from his tent, and after walking about for a short time he came to a pond. Here he sat down on the bank and was lost in thought. It was autumn. The trees growing along the edge of the water were shedding their leaves, which floated hither and thither on the surface of the pond. By and by, Kote's attention was attracted to a spider on the brink of the water. The little insect was trying to get on to one of the floating leaves nearby. It did so at last, and was soon floating over the water to the other side of the pond. This little incident made the clever emperor think that he might try to make something that could carry himself and his men over the river, in the same way that the leaf had carried over the spider. He set to work and persevered till he invented the first boat. When he found that it was a success, he set all his men to make more, and in time there were enough boats for the whole army. Kotei now took his army across the river and attacked Shiyu's headquarters. He gained a complete victory, and so put an end to the war which had troubled his country for so long. This wise and good emperor did not rest till he had secured peace and prosperity throughout his whole land. He was beloved by his subjects, who now enjoyed the happiness of peace for many long years under him. He spent a great deal of time in making inventions which would benefit his people, and he succeeded in many besides the boat and the south pointing Shinnensha. He had reigned about 100 years when one day, as Kotei was looking upwards, the sky became suddenly red and something came glittering like gold towards the earth. As it came nearer, Kotei saw that it was a great dragon. The dragon approached and bowed down its head before the emperor. The empress and the courtiers were so frightened that they ran away screaming. But the emperor only smiled and called to them to stop and said, "Do not be afraid. This is a messenger from heaven. My time here is finished." He then mounted the dragon, which began to ascend towards the sky. When the empress and the courtiers saw this, they all cried out together, "Wait a moment, we wish to come too." And they all ran and caught hold of the dragon's beard and tried to mount him. But it was impossible for so many people to ride on the dragon. Several of them hung on to the creature's beard, so that when it tried to mount, the hair was pulled out and they fell to the ground. Meanwhile, the empress and a few of the courtiers were safely seated on the dragon's back. The dragon flew up so high in the heavens that in a short time the inmates of the palace, who had been left behind disappointed, could see them no more. After some time, a bow and an arrow dropped to the earth in the courtyard of the palace. They were recognized as having belonged to the Emperor Kotei. The courtiers took them up carefully and preserved them as sacred relics in the palace. The story of Prince Yamato. Take the insignia of the great Japanese Empire is composed of 3 treasures which have been considered sacred and guarded with jealous care from time immemorial. These are the Yatano no Kagami, or the mirror of Yata, the Yasakami no Magatama, or the jewel of Yasakami, and the Murakumo no Tsurugi, or the sword of Murakumo. Of these 3 treasures of the empire, the sword of Murakumo, afterwards known as Kusanagi no Tsurugi, or the grass-cleaving sword, is considered the most precious and most highly to be honored, for it is the symbol of strength to this nation of warriors and the talisman of invincibility for the emperor, while he holds it sacred in the shrine of his ancestors. Nearly 2,000 years ago, this sword was kept at the shrines of Ait, the temples dedicated to the worship of Amaterasu, the great and beautiful sun goddess, from whom the Japanese emperors are said to be descended. There is a story of knightly adventure and daring which explains why the name of the sword was changed from that of Murakumo to Kusanagi, which means grass clearing. Once, many years ago, there was born a son to the Emperor Keiko, the 12th in descent from the great Jimmu, the founder of the Japanese dynasty. This prince was the 2nd son of the Emperor Kiko, and he was named Yamato. From his childhood, he proved himself to be of remarkable strength, wisdom, and courage, and his father noticed with pride that he gave promise of great things, and he loved him even more than he did his elder son. Now, when Prince Yamato had grown to manhood, In the olden days of Japanese history, a boy was considered to have reached man's estate at the early age of 16. The realm was much troubled by a band of outlaws whose chiefs were two brothers, Kumaso and Takeru. These rebels seemed to delight in rebelling against the king, in breaking the laws and defying all authority. At last King Keiko ordered his younger son, Prince Yamato, to subdue the brigands and, if possible, to rid the land of their evil lives. Prince Yamato was only 16 years of age. He had but reached his manhood according to the law. Yet though he was such a youth in years, he possessed the dauntless spirit of a warrior of fuller age, and knew not what fear was. Even then, there was no man who could rival him for courage and bold deeds, and he received his father's command with great joy. He at once made ready to start, and great was the stir in the precincts of the palace as he and his trusty followers gathered together and prepared for the expedition and polished up their armor and donned it. Before he left his father's court, he went to pray at the shrine of Ise and to take leave of his aunt, the Princess Yamato, for his heart was somewhat heavy at the thought of the dangers he had to face, and he felt that he needed the protection of his ancestress, Amaterasu, the sun goddess. The princess, his aunt, came out to give him glad welcome and congratulated him on being trusted with so great a mission by his father, the king. She then gave him one of her gorgeous robes as a keepsake to go with him and to bring him good luck, saying that it would surely be of service to him on this adventure. She then wished him all success in his undertaking and bade him good speed. The young prince bowed low before his aunt and received her gracious gift with much pleasure and many respectful bows. "I will now set out," said the prince, and returning to the palace, he put himself at the head of his troops. Thus cheered by his aunt's blessing, he felt ready for all that might befall. And marching through the land, he went down to the southern island of Kyushu, the home of the brigands. Before many days had passed, he reached the southern island, and then slowly but surely made his way to the headquarters of the chiefs, Kumaso and Takeru. He now met with great difficulties, for he found the country exceedingly wild and rough. The mountains were high and steep, the valleys dark and deep, and huge trees and boulders of rock blocked up the road and stopped the progress of his army. It was all but impossible to go on. Though the prince was but a youth, he had the wisdom of years, and, seeing that it was vain to try and lead his men further, he said to himself, "To attempt to fight a battle in this impassable country unknown to my men only makes my task harder. We cannot clear the roads and fight as well. It is wiser for me to resort to stratagem and come upon my enemies unawares. In that way I may be able to kill them without much exertion." So he now bade his army halt by the way. His wife, the Princess Ototachibana, had accompanied him, and he bade her bring him the robe his aunt, the priestess of Ise, had given him, and to help him attire himself as a woman. With her help he put on the robe and let his hair down till it flowed over his shoulders. Ototachibana then brought him her comb, which he put in his black tresses, and then adorned himself with strings of strange jewels, just as you see in the picture. When he had finished his unusual toilet, Ototachibana brought him her mirror. He smiled as he gazed at himself. The disguise was so perfect, he hardly knew himself, so changed was he. All traces of the warrior had disappeared, and in the shining surface only a beautiful lady looked back at him. Thus completely disguised, he set out for the enemy's camp alone. In the folds of his silk gown, next his strong heart, was hidden a sharp dagger. The two chiefs, Kumaso and Takeru, were sitting in their tent, resting in the cool of the evening, when the prince approached. They were talking of the news which had recently been carried to them. that the king's son had entered their country with a large army determined to exterminate their band. They had both heard of the young warrior's renown, and for the first time in their wicked lives they felt afraid. In a pause in their talk, they happened to look up, and saw through the door of the tent a beautiful woman robed in sumptuous garments coming towards them. Like an apparition of loveliness she appeared in the soft twilight. Little did they dream that it was their enemy whose coming they so dreaded, who now stood before them in this disguise. "What a beautiful woman! Where has she come from?" said the astonished Kumaso, forgetting war and counsel and everything as he looked at the gentle intruder. He beckoned to the disguised prince and bade him sit down and serve them with wine. Yamato. Take felt his heart swell with a fierce glee, for he now knew that his plan would succeed. However, he dissembled cleverly, and putting on a sweet air of shyness, he approached the rebel chief with slow steps and eyes glancing like a frightened deer. Charmed to distraction by the girl's loveliness, Kumaso drank cup after cup of wine for the pleasure of seeing her pour it out for him, till at last he was quite overcome with the quantity he had drunk. This was the moment for which the brave prince had been waiting. Flinging down the wine jar, he seized the tipsy and astonished Kumaso, and quickly stabbed him to death with the dagger which he had secretly carried hidden in his breast. Takeru, the brigand's brother, was terror-struck as soon as he saw what was happening, and tried to escape, but Prince Yamato was too quick for him. Ere he could reach the tent door, the prince was at his heel. His garments were clutched by a hand of iron, and a dagger flashed before his eyes, and he lay stabbed to the earth, dying but not yet dead. "Wait 1 moment," gasped the brigand painfully, and he seized the prince's hand. Yamato relaxed his hold somewhat and said, "Why should I pause, thou villain?" The brigand raised himself fearfully and said, "Tell me from whence you come, and whom I have the honor of addressing." "Hitherto I believed that my dead brother and I were the strongest men in the land, and that there was no one who could overcome us. Alone you have ventured into our stronghold, alone you have attacked and killed us. Surely you are more than mortal." Then the young prince answered with a proud smile, "I am the son of the king, and my name is Yamato. And I have been sent by my father as the avenger of evil to bring death to all rebels. No longer shall robbery and murder hold my people in terror." And he held the dagger dripping red above the rebel's head. "Ah!" gasped the dying man with a great effort. "I have often heard of you. You are indeed a strong man to have so easily overcome us. Allow me to give you a new name. From henceforth you shall be known as Yamato Take, our title. I bequeath to you as the bravest man in Yamato." And with these noble words, Takeru fell back and died. The prince, having thus successfully put an end to his father's enemies in the world, was prepared to return to the capital. On the way back, he passed through the province of Idom. Here he met with another outlaw named Izumo Takeru, who he knew had done much harm in the land. He again resorted to stratagem and feigned friendship with the rebel under an assumed name. Having done this, he made a sword of wood and jammed it tightly in the shaft of his own strong sword. This he purposely buckled to his side and wore on every occasion when he expected to meet the third robber, Takeru. He now invited Takeru to the bank of the river Hinogawa and persuaded him to try a swim with him in the cool, refreshing waters of the river. As it was a hot summer's day, the rebel was nothing loath to take a plunge in the river, while his enemy was still swimming down the stream. The prince turned back and landed with all possible haste. Unperceived, he managed to change swords, putting his wooden one in place of the keen steel sword of Takeru. Knowing nothing of this, the brigand came up to the bank shortly. As soon as he had landed and donned his clothes, the prince came forward and asked him to cross swords with him to prove his skill, saying, "Let us two prove which is the better swordsman of the two." The robber agreed with delight, feeling certain of victory, for he was famous as a fencer in his province, and he did not know who his adversary was. He seized quickly what he thought was his sword and stood on guard to defend himself. Alas! For the rebel, the sword was the wooden one of the young prince, and in vain Takeru tried to unsheath it. It was jammed fast. Not all his exerted strength could move it. Even if his efforts had been successful, the sword would have been of no use to him, for it was of wood. Yamato. Take saw that his enemy was in his power, and swinging high the sword he had taken from Takeru, he brought it down with great might and dexterity and cut off the robber's head. In this way, sometimes by using his wisdom, and sometimes by using his bodily strength, and at other times by resorting to craftiness, which was as much esteemed in those days as it is despised in these, he prevailed against all the king's foes, one by one, and brought peace and rest to the land and the people. When he returned to the capital, the king praised him for his brave deeds, and held a feast in the palace in honor of his safe coming home, and presented him with many rare gifts. From this time forth, the king loved him more than ever, and would not let Yamato take go from his side, for he said that his son was now as precious to him as one of his arms. But the prince was not allowed to live an idle life long. When he was about 30 years old, news was brought that the Ainu race, the aborigines of the islands of Japan, who had been conquered and pushed northwards by the Japanese, had rebelled in the eastern provinces, and leaving the vicinity which had been allotted to them, were causing great trouble in the land. The king decided that it was necessary to send an army to do battle with them and bring them to reason. But who was to lead the men? Prince Yamato at once offered to go and bring the newly arisen rebels into subjection. Now, as the king loved the prince dearly, and could not bear to have him go out of his sight even for the length of one day, he was, of course, very loath to send him on his dangerous expedition. But in the whole army there was no warrior so strong or so brave as the prince his son, so that his majesty, unable to do otherwise, reluctantly complied with Yamato's wish. When the time came for the prince to start, the king gave him a spear called the 8 arms length spear of the holly tree. The handle was probably made from the wood of the holly tree, and ordered him to set out to subjugate the eastern barbarians, as the Ainu were then called. The 8 arms length spear of the holly tree of those old days was prized by warriors, just as much as the standard or banner is valued by a regiment in these modern days, when given by the king to his soldiers on the occasion of setting out for war. The prince respectfully and with great reverence received the king's spear, and leaving the capital, marched with his army to the east. On his way, he visited first of all the temples of Isa for worship, and his aunt, the princess of Yamato and high priestess, came out to greet him. She it was who had given him her robe, which had proved such a boon to him before in helping him to overcome and slay the brigands of the West. He told her all that had happened to him, and of the great part her keepsake had played in the success of his previous undertaking, and thanked her very heartily. When she heard that he was starting out once again to do battle with his father's enemies, she went into the temple, and reappeared, bearing a sword and a beautiful bag which she had made herself, and which was full of flints, which in those times people used instead of matches for making fire. These she presented to him as a parting gift. The sword was the sword of Murakumo, one of the 3 sacred treasures which comprise the insignia of the Imperial House of Japan. No more auspicious talisman of luck and success could she have given her nephew, and she bade him use it in the hour of his greatest need. Yamato. Take now bade farewell to his aunt, and once more placing himself at the head of his men, he marched to the farthest east through the province of Owari, and then he reached the province of Suruga. Here the governor welcomed the prince right heartily and entertained him royally with many feasts. When these were over, the governor told his guest that his country was famous for its fine deer, and proposed a deer hunt for the prince's amusement. The prince was utterly deceived by the cordiality of his host, which was all feigned, and gladly consented to join in the hunt. The governor then led the prince to a wild and extensive plain, where the grass grew high and in great abundance. Quite ignorant that the governor had laid a trap for him with the desire to compass his death, the prince began to ride hard and hunt down the deer, when all of a sudden, to his amazement, he saw flames and smoke bursting out from the bush in front of him. Realizing his danger, he tried to retreat, but no sooner did he turn his horse in the opposite direction than he saw that even there the prairie was on fire. At the same time, the grass on his left and right burst into flames, and these began to spread swiftly towards him on all sides. He looked round for a chance of escape. There was none. He was surrounded by fire. "This deer hunt was then only a cunning trick of the enemy," said the prince, looking round on the flames and the smoke that crackled and rolled in towards him on every side. "What a fool I was to be lured into this trap like a wild beast!" And he ground his teeth with rage as he thought of the governor's smiling treachery. Dangerous as was his situation now, the prince was not in the least confounded. In his dire extremity, he remembered the gifts his aunt had given him when they parted, and it seemed to him as if she must, with prophetic foresight, have divined this hour of need. He coolly opened the flint bag that his aunt had given him, and set fire to the grass near him. Then, drawing the sword of Murakumo from its sheath, he set to work to cut down the grass on either side of him with all speed. He determined to die, if that were necessary, fighting for his life and not standing still, waiting for death to come to him. Strange to say, the wind began to change and to blow from the opposite direction, and the fiercest portion of the burning bush, which had hitherto threatened to come upon him, was now blown right away from him, and the prince, without even a scratch on his body or a single hair burned, lived to tell the tale of his wonderful escape, while the wind, rising to a gale, overtook the governor, and he was burned to death in the flames he had set alight to kill Yamato Take. Now, the prince ascribed his escape entirely to the virtue of the sword of Murakumo, and to the protection of Amaterasu, the sun goddess of Aise, who controls the wind and all the elements and ensures the safety of all who pray to her in the hour of danger. Lifting the precious sword, he raised it above his head many times in token of his great respect, and as he did this, he renamed it Kusanagi, no Tsurugi, or the grass-cleaving sword, and the place where he set fire to the grass round him and escaped from death in the burning prairie, he called Yaitsu. To this day, there is a spot along the great Tokaido Railway named Yaitsu, which is said to be the very place where this thrilling event took place. Thus did the brave Prince Yamato take escape out of the snare laid for him by his enemy. He was full of resource and courage, and finally outwitted and subdued all his foes. Leaving Yaitsu, he marched eastward and came to the shore at Itsu, from whence he wished to cross to Kazusa. In these dangers and adventures he had been followed by his faithful loving wife, the Princess Ototachibana. For his sake, she counted the weariness of the long journeys and the dangers of war as nothing, and her love for her warrior husband was so great that she felt well repaid for all her wanderings if she could but hand him his sword when he sallied forth to battle, or minister to his wants when he returned, weary, to the camp. But the heart of the prince was full of war and conquest, and he cared little for the faithful Ototachibana. From long exposure in travelling, and from care and grief at her lord's coldness to her, her beauty had faded, and her ivory skin was burnt brown by the sun, and the prince told her one day that her place was in the palace behind the screens at home, and not with him upon the warpath. But in spite of rebuffs and indifference on her husband's part, Ototachibana could not find it in her heart to leave him. But perhaps it would have been better for her if she had done so, for on the way to Idzu, when they came to Owari, her heart was well nigh broken. Here dwelt in a palace shaded by pine trees and approached by imposing gates the Princess Miyazu, beautiful as the cherry blossom in the blushing dawn of a spring morning. Her garments were dainty and bright, and her skin was white as snow, for she had never known what it was to be weary along the path of duty, or to walk in the heat of a summer's sun. And the prince was ashamed of his sunburnt wife in her travel-stained garments, and bade her remain behind while he went to visit the Princess Miyazu. Day after day he spent hours in the gardens and the palace of his new friend, thinking only of his pleasure, and caring little for his poor wife who remained behind to weep in the tent at the misery which had come into her life. Yet she was so faithful a wife, and her character so patient, that she never allowed a reproach to escape her lips, or a frown to mar the sweet sadness of her face. And she was ever ready with a smile to welcome her husband back or usher him forth wherever he went. At last the day came when the Prince Yamato must depart for Idzu and cross over the sea to Kazusa, and he bade his wife follow in his retinue as an attendant, while he went to take a ceremonious farewell of the Princess Miyazu. She came out to greet him dressed in gorgeous robes, and she seemed more beautiful than ever, and when Yamato saw her, he forgot his wife, his duty, and everything except the joy of the idle present, and swore that he would return to Owari and marry her when the war was over. And as he looked up when he had said these words, he met the large almond eyes of Ototachibana fixed full upon him in unspeakable sadness and wonder, and he knew that he had done wrong, but he hardened his heart and rode on, caring little for the pain he had caused her. When they reached the seashore at Idzu, his men sought for boats in which to cross the straits to Kazusa, but it was difficult to find boats enough to allow all the soldiers to embark. Then the prince stood on the beach, and in the pride of his strength he scoffed and said, "This is not the sea. This is only a brook. Why do you men want so many boats? I could jump this if I would." When at last they had all embarked and were fairly on their way across the straits, the sky suddenly clouded, and a great storm arose. The waves rose mountains high, the wind howled, the lightning flashed, and the thunder rolled. And the boat which held Ototachibana and the prince and his men was tossed from crest to crest of the rolling waves, till it seemed that every moment must be their last, and that they must all be swallowed up in the angry sea. For Kinjin, the dragon king of the sea, had heard Yamato take jeer, and had raised this terrible storm in anger, to show the scoffing prince how awful the sea could be, though it did but look like a brook. The terrified crew lowered the sails and looked after the rudder, and worked for their dear lives' sake, but all in vain. The storm only seemed to increase in violence, and all gave themselves up for lost. Then the faithful Ototachibana rose, and forgetting all the grief that her husband had caused her, forgetting even that he had wearied of her, in the one great desire of her love to save him, She determined to sacrifice her life to rescue him from death, if it were possible. While the waves dashed over the ship and the wind whirled round them in fury, she stood up and said, "Surely all this has come because the prince has angered Rinjin, the god of the sea, by his jesting. If so, I, Oto Tachibana, will appease the wrath of the sea, god who desires nothing less than my husband's life." Then addressing the sea, she said, "I will take the place of his augustness, Yamato take. I will now cast myself into your outraged depths, giving my life for his. Therefore hear me, and bring him safely to the shore of Kadzusa." With these words she leaped quickly into the boisterous sea, and the waves soon whirled her away, and she was lost to sight. Strange to say, the storm ceased at once, and the sea became as calm and smooth as the matting on which the astonished onlookers were sitting. The gods of the sea were now appeased, and the weather cleared, and the sun shone as on a summer's day. Yamato. Take soon reached the opposite shore and landed safely, even as his wife Oto Tachibana had prayed. His prowess in war was marvelous, and he succeeded after some time in conquering the eastern barbarians, the Ainu. He ascribed his safe landing wholly to the faithfulness of his wife, who had so willingly and lovingly sacrificed herself in the hour of his utmost peril. His heart was softened at the remembrance of her, and he never allowed her to pass from his thoughts even for a moment. Too late had he learned to esteem the goodness of her heart and the greatness of her love for him. As he was returning on his homeward way, he came to the high pass of the Usui Toge, and here he stood and gazed at the wonderful prospect beneath him. The country, from this great elevation, all lay open to his sight, a vast panorama of mountain and plain and forest, with rivers winding like silver ribbons through the land. Then far off he saw the distant sea, which shimmered like a luminous mist in the great distance, where Oto Tachibana had given her life for him. And as he turned towards it, he stretched out his arms, and thinking of her love which he had scorned and his faithlessness to her, his heart burst out into a sorrowful and bitter cry, "Azuma! Azuma! Ya! Oh, my wife, my wife!" And to this day, there is a district in Tokyo called Azuma, which commemorates the words of Prince Yamato take, and the place where his faithful wife leapt into the sea to save him is still pointed out. So, though in life the Princess Oto Tachibana was unhappy, history keeps her memory green, and the story of her unselfishness and heroic death will never pass away. Yamato. Take had now fulfilled all his father's orders. He had subdued all rebels, and rid the land of all robbers and enemies to the peace, and his renown was great. For in the whole land there was no one who could stand up against him. He was so strong in battle and wise in counsel. He was about to return straight for home by the way he had come, when the thought struck him that he would find it more interesting to take another route. So he passed through the province of Owari and came to the province of Omi. When the prince reached Omi, he found the people in a state of great excitement and fear. In many houses as he passed along, he saw the signs of mourning and heard loud lamentations. On inquiring the cause of this, he was told that a terrible monster had appeared in the mountains, who daily came down from thence and made raids on the villages, devouring whoever he could seize. Many homes had been made desolate, and the men were afraid to go out to their daily work in the fields, or the women to go to the rivers to wash their rice. When Yamato Take heard this, his wrath was kindled, and he said fiercely, "From the western end of Kyushu to the eastern corner of Yezo, I have subdued all the king's enemies. There is no one who dares to break the laws, or to rebel against the king. It is indeed a matter for wonder that here in this place, so near the capital, a wicked monster has dared to take up his abode and be the terror of the king's subjects. Not long shall it find pleasure in devouring innocent folk. I will start out and kill it at once." With these words he set out for the Ibuki mountain, where the monster was said to live. He climbed up a good distance, when all of a sudden, at a winding in the path, a monster serpent appeared before him and stopped the way. "This must be the monster," said the prince. "I do not need my sword for a serpent. I can kill him with my hands." He thereupon sprang upon the serpent and tried to strangle it to death with his bare arms. It was not long before his prodigious strength gained the mastery, and the serpent lay dead at his feet. Now a sudden darkness came over the mountain, and rain began to fall, so that for the gloom and the rain the prince could hardly see which way to take. In a short time, however, while he was groping his way down the pass, the weather cleared, and our brave hero was able to make his way quickly down the mountain. When he got back, he began to feel ill and to have burning pains in his feet, so he knew that the serpent had poisoned him. So great was his suffering that he could hardly move, much less walk. So he had himself carried to a place in the mountains, famous for its hot mineral springs, which rose bubbling out of the earth and almost boiling from the volcanic fires beneath. Yamato. Take bathed daily in these waters, and gradually he felt his strength come again, and the pains left him, till at last one day he found with great joy that he was quite recovered. He now hastened to the temples of Ise, where you will remember that he prayed before undertaking this long expedition. His aunt, priestess of the shrine, who had blessed him on his setting out, now came to welcome him back. He told her of the many dangers he had encountered, and of how marvelously his life had been preserved through all, and she praised his courage and his warrior's prowess, and then, putting on her most magnificent robes, she returned thanks to their ancestress, the sun goddess, Amaterasu, to whose protection they both ascribed the prince's wonderful preservation. Here ends the story of Prince Yamato, take of Japan. The story of the man who did not wish to die. Long, long ago there lived a man called Taro. His surname meant millionaire. But although he was not so rich as all that, he was still very far removed from being poor. He had inherited a small fortune from his father and lived on this, spending his time carelessly, without any serious thoughts of work, till he was about 32 years of age. One day, without any reason whatsoever, the thought of death and sickness came to him. The idea of falling ill or dying made him very wretched. "I should like to live," he said to himself, "till I am 500 or 600 years old at least, free from all sickness. The ordinary span of a man's life is very short." He wondered whether it were possible, by living simply and frugally henceforth, to prolong his life as long as he wished. He knew there were many stories in ancient history of emperors who had lived 1,000 years, and there was a princess of Yamato who, it was said, lived to the age of 500. This was the latest story of a very long life record. Taro had often heard the tale of the Chinese king named Shinnensha. He was one of the most able and powerful rulers in Chinese history. He built all the large palaces, and also the famous Great Wall of China. He had everything in the world he could wish for, but in spite of all his happiness and the luxury and the splendor of his court, the wisdom of his counselors and the glory of his reign, he was miserable because he knew that one day he must die and leave it all. When Shinnensha went to bed at night, when he rose in the morning, as he went through his day, the thought of death was always with him. He could not get away from it. Ah, if only he could find the elixir of life, he would be happy. The emperor at last called a meeting of his courtiers and asked them all if they could not find for him the elixir of life, of which he had so often read and heard. One old courtier, Jofuku by name, said that far away across the seas there was a country called Horizon, and that certain hermits lived there who possessed the secret of the elixir of life. Whoever drank of this wonderful draught lived forever. The emperor ordered Jofuku to set out for the land of Horizon to find the hermits and to bring him back a feel of the magic elixir. He gave Jofuku one of his best junks, fitted it out for him, and loaded it with great quantities of treasures and precious stones for Jofuku to take as presents to the hermits. Jofuku sailed for the land of Horizon, but he never returned to the waiting emperor. But ever since that time, Mount Fuji has been said to be the fabled Horizon, and the home of hermits who had the secret of the elixir, and Jofuku has been worshipped as their patron god. Now, Taro determined to set out to find the hermits, and if he could, to become one, so that he might obtain the water of perpetual life. He remembered that as a child he had been told that not only did these hermits live on Mount Fuji, but that they were said to inhabit all the very high peaks. So he left his old home to the care of his relatives and started out on his quest. He traveled through all the mountainous regions of the land, climbing to the tops of the highest peaks, but never a hermit did he find. At last, after wandering in an unknown region for many days, he met a hunter. "Can you tell me," asked Taro, "where the hermits live, who have the elixir of life?" "No," said the hunter. "I can't tell you where such hermits live, but there is a notorious robber living in these parts. It is said that he is chief of a band of 200 followers. This odd answer irritated Taro very much, and he thought how foolish it was to waste more time in looking for the hermits in this way, so he decided to go at once to the shrine of Jofuku, who is worshipped as the patron god of the hermits in the south of Japan. Taro reached the shrine and prayed for 7 days, entreating Jofuku to show him the way to a hermit who could give him what he wanted so much to find. At midnight of the 7th day, as Taro knelt in the temple, the door of the innermost shrine flew open, and Jofuku appeared in a luminous cloud, and calling to Taro to come nearer, spoke thus: "Your desire is a very selfish one, and cannot be easily granted. You think that you would like to become a hermit so as to find the elixir of life. Do you know how hard a hermit's life is? A hermit is only allowed to eat fruit and berries and the bark of pine trees. A hermit must cut himself off from the world so that his heart may become as pure as gold and free from every earthly desire. Gradually, after following these strict rules, the hermit ceases to feel hunger or cold or heat, and his body becomes so light that he can ride on a crane or a carp and can walk on water without getting his feet wet. You, Taro, are fond of good living and of every comfort. You are not even like an ordinary man, for you are exceptionally idle and more sensitive to heat and cold than most people. You would never be able to go barefoot or to wear only one thin dress in the winter-time. Do you think that you would ever have the patience or the endurance to live a hermit's life? In answer to your prayer, however, I will help you in another way. I will send you to the country of perpetual life, where death never comes, where the people live forever." Saying this, Jofuku put into Taro's hand a little crane made of paper, telling him to sit on its back and it would carry him there. Taro obeyed wonderingly. The crane grew large enough for him to ride on it with comfort. It then spread its wings, rose high in the air, and flew away over the mountains right out to sea. Taro was at first quite frightened, but by degrees he grew accustomed to the swift flight through the air. On and on they went for thousands of miles. The bird never stopped for rest or food, but as it was a paper bird, it doubtless did not require any nourishment, and strange to say, neither did Sentaro. After several days they reached an island. The crane flew some distance inland and then alighted. As soon as Sentaro got down from the bird's back, the crane folded up of its own accord and flew into his pocket. Now Sentaro began to look about him wonderingly, curious to see what the country of perpetual life was like. He walked first round about the country and then through the town. Everything was, of course, quite strange and different from his own land. But both the land and the people seemed prosperous. So he decided that it would be good for him to stay there, and took up lodgings at one of the hotels. The proprietor was a kind man, and when Sentaro told him that he was a stranger and had come to live there, he promised to arrange everything that was necessary with the governor of the city concerning Sentaro's sojourn there. He even found a house for his guest, and in this way Sentaro obtained his great wish and became a resident in the country of perpetual life. Within the memory of all the islanders, no man had ever died there, and sickness was a thing unknown. Priests had come over from India and China and told them of a beautiful country called Paradise, where happiness and bliss and contentment fill all men's hearts. But its gates could only be reached by dying. This tradition was handed down for ages from generation to generation, but none knew exactly what death was, except that it led to paradise. Quite unlike Sentaro and other ordinary people, instead of having a great dread of death, they all, both rich and poor, longed for it as something good and desirable. They were all tired of their long, long lives, and longed to go to the happy land of contentment called Paradise, of which the priests had told them centuries ago. All this Sentaro soon found out by talking to the islanders. He found himself, according to his ideas, in the land of topsy-turvydom. Everything was upside down. He had wished to escape from dying. He had come to the land of perpetual life with great relief and joy, only to find that the inhabitants themselves, doomed never to die, would consider it bliss to find death. What he had hitherto considered poison, these people ate as good food, and all the things to which he had been accustomed as food they rejected. Whenever any merchants from other countries arrived, the rich people rushed to them eager to buy poisons. These they swallowed eagerly, hoping for death to come so that they might go to paradise. But what were deadly poisons in other lands were without effect in this strange place, and people who swallowed them with the hope of dying only found that in a short time they felt better in health instead of worse. Vainly they tried to imagine what death could be like. The wealthy would have given all their money and all their goods if they could but shorten their lives to 200 or 300 years even. Without any change, to live on forever seemed to this people wearisome and sad. In the chemist shops there was a drug which was in constant demand, because after using it for 100 years, it was supposed to turn the hair slightly grey and to bring about disorders of the stomach. Sentaro was astonished to find that the poisonous globefish was served up in restaurants as a delectable dish, and hawkers in the streets went about selling sauces made of Spanish flies. He never saw anyone ill after eating these horrible things, nor did he ever see anyone with as much as a cold. Sentaro was delighted. He said to himself that he would never grow tired of living, and that he considered it profane to wish for death. He was the only happy man on the island. For his part, he wished to live thousands of years and to enjoy life. He set himself up in business, and for the present never even dreamed of going back to his native land. As years went by, however, things did not go as smoothly as at first. He had heavy losses in business, and several times some affairs went wrong with his neighbors. This caused him great annoyance. Time passed like the flight of an arrow for him, for he was busy from morning till night. 300 years went by in this monotonous way, and then at last he began to grow tired of life in this country, and he longed to see his own land and his old home. However long he lived here, life would always be the same. So was it not foolish and wearisome to stay on here forever? Sentaro, in his wish to escape from the country of perpetual life, recollected Jofuku, who had helped him before when he was wishing to escape from death, and he prayed to the saint to bring him back to his own land again. No sooner did he pray than the paper crane popped out of his pocket. Sentaro was amazed to see that it had remained undamaged after all these years. Once more the bird grew and grew till it was large enough for him to mount it. As he did so, the bird spread its wings and flew swiftly out across the sea in the direction of Japan. Such was the willfulness of the man's nature that he looked back and regretted all he had left behind. He tried to stop the bird in vain. The crane held on its way for thousands of miles across the ocean. Then a storm came on, and the wonderful paper crane got damp, crumpled up, and fell into the sea. Sentaro fell with it. Very much frightened at the thought of being drowned, he cried out loudly to Jofuku to save him. He looked round, but there was no ship in sight. He swallowed a quantity of seawater, which only increased his miserable plight. While he was thus struggling to keep himself afloat, he saw a monstrous shark swimming towards him. As it came nearer, it opened its huge mouth, ready to devour him. Sentaro was all but paralyzed with fear now that he felt his end so near, and screamed out as loudly as ever he could to Jofuku to come and rescue him. Lo, and behold, Sentaro was awakened by his own screams to find that during his long prayer he had fallen asleep before the shrine, and that all his extraordinary and frightful adventures had been only a wild dream. He was in a cold perspiration with fright, and utterly bewildered. Suddenly, a bright light came towards him, and in the light stood a messenger. The messenger held a book in his hand and spoke to Sentaro. "I am sent to you by Jofuku, who in answer to your prayer has permitted you in a dream to see the land of perpetual life. But you grew weary of living there and begged to be allowed to return to your native land so that you might die. Jofuku, so that he might try you, allowed you to drop into the sea and then sent a shark to swallow you up. Your desire for death was not real, for even at that moment you cried out loudly and shouted for help. It is also vain for you to wish to become a hermit or to find the elixir of life. These things are not for such as you. Your life is not austere enough. It is best for you to go back to your paternal home and to live a good and industrious life. Never neglect to keep the anniversaries of your ancestors, and make it your duty to provide for your children's future. Thus will you live to a good old age and be happy. But give up the vain desire to escape death, for no man can do that, and by this time you have surely found out that even when selfish desires are granted, they do not bring happiness. In this book I give you, there are many precepts good for you to know. If you study them, you will be guided in the way I have pointed out to you." The angel disappeared as soon as he had finished speaking, and Sentaro took the lesson to heart. With the book in his hand, he returned to his old home, and giving up all his old vain wishes, tried to live a good and useful life, and to observe the lessons taught him in the book, and he and his house prospered henceforth. The story of the old man who made with head trees to flower. Long, long ago, there lived an old man and his wife who supported themselves by cultivating a small plot of land. Their life had been a very happy and peaceful one, save for one great sorrow, and this was, they had no child. Their only pet was a dog named Shiro, and on him they lavished all the affection of their old age. Indeed, they loved him so much that whenever they had anything nice to eat, they denied themselves to give it to Shiro. Now, Shiro means white, and he was so called because of his color. He was a real Japanese dog, and very like a small wolf in appearance. The happiest hour of the day, both for the old man and his dog, was when the man returned from his work in the field, and having finished his frugal supper of rice and vegetables, would take what he had saved from the meal out to the little veranda that ran round the cottage. Sure enough, Shiro was waiting for his master and the evening tick-bit. Then the old man said, "Chin, chin," and Shiro sat up and begged, and his master gave him the food. Next door to this good old couple there lived another old man and his wife, who were both wicked and cruel, and who hated their good neighbors and the dog Shiro with all their might. Whenever Shiro happened to look into their kitchen, they at once kicked him or threw something at him, sometimes even wounding him. One day, Shiro was heard barking for a long time in the field at the back of his master's house. The old man, thinking that perhaps some birds were attacking the corn, hurried out to see what was the matter. As soon as Shiro saw his master, he ran to meet him, wagging his tail, and, seizing the end of his kimono, dragged him under a large yenoki tree. Here he began to dig very industriously with his paws, yelping with joy all the time. The old man, unable to understand what it all meant, stood looking on in bewilderment. But Shiro went on barking and digging with all his might. The thought that something might be hidden beneath the tree and that the dog had scented it at last struck the old man. He ran back to the house, fetched his spade, and began to dig the ground at that spot. What was his astonishment when, after digging for some time, he came upon a heap of old and valuable coins, and the deeper he dug, the more gold coins did he find. So intent was the old man on his work that he never saw the cross face of his neighbor peering at him through the bamboo hedge. At last all the gold coins lay shining on the ground. Shiro sat by erect with pride, and looking fondly at his master as if to say, "You see, though only a dog, I can make some return for all the kindness you show me." The old man ran in to call his wife, and together they carried home the treasure. Thus, in one day, the poor old man became rich. His gratitude to the faithful dog knew no bounds, and he loved and petted him more than ever, if that were possible. The cross old neighbor, attracted by Shiro's barking, had been an unseen and envious witness of the finding of the treasure. He began to think that he, too, would like to find a fortune. So, a few days later, he called at the old man's house and very ceremoniously asked permission to borrow Shiro for a short time. Shiro's master thought this a strange request, because he knew quite well that not only did his neighbor not love his pet dog, but that he never lost an opportunity of striking and tormenting him whenever the dog crossed his path. But the good old man was too kind-hearted to refuse his neighbor, so he consented to lend the dog on condition that he should be taken great care of. The wicked old man returned to his home with an evil smile on his face, and told his wife how he had succeeded in his crafty intentions. He then took his spade and hastened to his own field, forcing the unwilling Shiro to follow him. As soon as he reached a yenoki tree, he said to the dog, threateningly, "If there were gold coins under your master's tree, there must also be gold coins under my tree. You must find them for me. Where are they? Where? Where?" And catching hold of Shiro's neck, he held the dog's head to the ground, so that Shiro began to scratch and dig in order to free himself from the horrid old man's grasp. The old man was very pleased when he saw the dog begin to scratch and dig. for he at once supposed that some gold coins lay buried under his tree as well as under his neighbour's, and that the dog had scented them as before. So, pushing Shiro away, he began to dig himself, but there was nothing to be found. As he went on digging, a foul smell was noticeable, and he at last came upon a refuse heap. The old man's disgust can be imagined. This soon gave way to anger. He had seen his neighbour's good fortune, and hoping for the same luck himself, he had borrowed the dog Shiro. And now, just as he seemed on the point of finding what he sought, only a horrid-smelling refuse heap had rewarded him for a morning's digging. Instead of blaming his own greed for his disappointment, he blamed the poor dog. He seized his spade, and with all his strength struck Shiro and killed him on the spot. He then threw the dog's body into the hole which he had dug, in the hope of finding a treasure of gold coins, and covered it over with the earth. Then he returned to the house, telling no one, not even his wife, what he had done. After waiting several days, as the dog Shiro did not return, his master began to grow anxious. Day after day went by, and the good old man waited in vain. Then he went to his neighbour and asked him to give him back his dog. Without any shame or hesitation, the wicked neighbour answered that he had killed Shiro because of his bad behaviour. At this dreadful news, Shiro's master wept many sad and bitter tears. Great indeed was his woeful surprise, but he was too good and gentle to reproach his bad neighbour. Learning that Shiro was buried under the yenoki tree in the field, he asked the old man to give him the tree in remembrance of his poor dog Shiro. Even the cross old neighbour could not refuse such a simple request. So he consented to give the old man the tree under which Shiro lay buried. Shiro's master then cut the tree down and carried it home. Out of the trunk he made a mortar. In this his wife put some rice, and he began to pound it with the intention of making a festival to the memory of his dog Shiro. A strange thing happened. His wife put the rice into the mortar, and no sooner had he begun to pound it to make the cakes than it began to increase in quantity gradually, till it was about 5 times the original amount, and the cakes were turned out of the mortar as if an invisible hand were at work. When the old man and his wife saw this, they understood that it was a reward to them from Shiro for their faithful love to him. They tasted the cakes and found them nicer than any other food. So from this time they never troubled about food, for they lived upon the cakes with which the mortar never ceased to supply them. The greedy neighbour, hearing of this new piece of good luck, was filled with envy as before, and called on the old man and asked leave to borrow the wonderful mortar for a short time, pretending that he, too, sorrowed for the death of Shiro and wished to make cakes for a festival to the dog's memory. The old man did not in the least wish to lend it to his cruel neighbour, but he was too kind to refuse. So the envious man carried home the mortar, but he never brought it back. Several days passed, and Shiro's master waited in vain for the mortar, so he went to call on the borrower, and asked him to be good enough to return the mortar if he had finished with it. He found him sitting by a big fire made of pieces of wood. On the ground lay what looked very much like pieces of a broken mortar. In answer to the old man's inquiry, the wicked neighbour answered haughtily, "Have you come to ask me for your mortar? I broke it to pieces, and now I am making a fire of the wood. For when I tried to pound cakes in it, only some horrid smelling stuff came out." The good old man said, "I am very sorry for that. It is a great pity you did not ask me for the cakes if you wanted them. I would have given you as many as ever you wanted. Now please give me the ashes of the mortar, as I wish to keep them in remembrance of my dog." The neighbour consented at once, and the old man carried home a basket full of ashes. Not long after this, the old man accidentally scattered some of the ashes made by the burning of the mortar on the trees of his garden. A wonderful thing happened. It was late in autumn, and all the trees had shed their leaves. But no sooner did the ashes touch their branches than the cherry trees, the plum trees, and all other blossoming shrubs burst into bloom, so that the old man's garden was suddenly transformed into a beautiful picture of spring. The old man's delight knew no bounds, and he carefully preserved the remaining ashes. The story of the old man's garden spread far and wide, and people from far and near came to see the wonderful sight. One day, soon after this, the old man heard someone knocking at his door, and going to the porch to see who it was. He was surprised to see a knight standing there. This knight told him that he was a retainer of a great daimyo earl, that one of the favorite cherry trees in this nobleman's garden had withered, and that though everyone in his service had tried all manner of means to revive it, none took effect. The knight was sore perplexed when he saw what great displeasure the loss of his favorite cherry tree caused the daimyo. At this point, fortunately, they had heard that there was a wonderful old man who could make withered trees to blossom, and that his lord had sent him to ask the old man to come to him. "And," added the knight, "I shall be very much obliged if you will come at once." The good old man was greatly surprised at what he heard, but respectfully followed the knight to the nobleman's palace. The daimyo, who had been impatiently awaiting the old man's coming, as soon as he saw him asked him at once, "Are you the old man who can make withered trees flower even out of season?" The old man made an obeisance and replied, "I am that old man." Then the daimyo said, "You must make that dead cherry tree in my garden blossom again by means of your famous ashes. I shall look on." Then they all went into the garden. The daimyo and his retainers and the ladies in waiting who carried the daimyo's sword. The old man now tucked up his kimono and made ready to climb the tree. Saying, "Excuse me," he took the pot of ashes which he had brought with him and began to climb the tree, everyone watching his movements with great interest. At last he climbed to the spot where the tree divided into two great branches, and taking up his position here, the old man sat down and scattered the ashes right and left all over the branches and twigs. Wonderful indeed was the result. The withered tree at once burst into full bloom. The daimyo was so transported with joy that he looked as if he would go mad. He rose to his feet and spread out his fan, calling the old man down from the tree. He himself gave the old man a wine cup filled with the best sake, and rewarded him with much silver and gold and many other precious things. The daimyo ordered that henceforth the old man should call himself by the name of Hanasaka Jiji, or the old man who makes the trees to blossom, and that henceforth all were to recognize him by this name, and he sent him home with great honor. The wicked neighbor, as before, heard of the good old man's fortune, and of all that had so auspiciously befallen him, and he could not suppress all the envy and jealousy that filled his heart. He called to mind how he had failed in his attempt to find the gold coins, and then in making the magic cakes. This time surely he must succeed if he imitated the old man, who made withered trees to flower simply by sprinkling ashes on them. This would be the simplest task of all. So he set to work, and gathered together all the ashes which remained in the fireplace from the burning of the wonderful mortar. Then he set out in the hope of finding some great man to employ him, calling out loudly as he went along, "Here comes the wonderful man who can make withered trees blossom. Here comes the old man who can make dead trees blossom." The daimyo in his palace heard this cry and said, "That must be the Hanasaka Jiji passing. I have nothing to do today. Let him try his art again. It will amuse me to look on." So the retainers went out and brought in the impostor before their lord. The satisfaction of false old man can now be imagined. But the daimyo, looking at him, thought it strange that he was not at all like the old man he had seen before. So he asked him, "Are you the man whom I named Hanasaka Jiji?" And the envious neighbor answered with a lie, "Yes, my lord." "That is strange," said the daimyo. "I thought there was only one Hanasaka Jiji in the world. Has he now some disciples?" "I am the true Hanasaka Jiji. The one who came to you before was only my disciple," replied the old man again. "Then you must be more skillful than the other. Try what you can do and let me see." The envious neighbor, with the daimyo and his court following, then went into the garden and, approaching a dead tree, took out a handful of the ashes which he carried with him and scattered them over the tree. But not only did the tree not burst into flower, but not even a bud came forth. Thinking that he had not used enough ashes, the old man took handfuls and again sprinkled them over the withered tree, but all to no effect. After trying several times, the ashes were blown into the daimyo's eyes. This made him very angry, and he ordered his retainers to arrest the false Hanasaka Jiji at once and put him in prison for an impostor. From this imprisonment the wicked old man was never freed. Thus did he meet with punishment at last for all his evil doings. The good old man, however, with the treasure of gold coins which Shiro had found for him, and with all the gold and the silver which the daimyo had showered on him, became a rich and prosperous man in his old age, and lived a long and happy life, beloved and respected by all. The story of Urashima. Taro, the fisher laid. Long ago, in the province of Tango, there lived on the shore of Japan, in the little fishing village of Mizu, No-Yi, a young fisherman named Urashima Taro. His father had been a fisherman before him, and his skill had more than doubly descended to his son, for Urashima was the most skillful fisher in all that countryside, and could catch more bonito and tai in a day than his comrades could in a week. But in the little fishing village, more than for being a clever fisher of the sea, was he known for his kind heart. In his whole life he had never hurt anything, either great or small, and when a boy, his companions had always laughed at him, for he would never join with them in teasing animals, but always tried to keep them from this cruel sport. One soft summer twilight, he was going home at the end of a day's fishing when he came upon a group of children. They were all screaming and talking at the tops of their voices, and seemed to be in a state of great excitement about something. And on his going up to them to see what was the matter, he saw that they were tormenting a tortoise. First one boy pulled it this way, then another boy pulled it that way, while a third child beat it with a stick, and the fourth hammered its shell with a stone. Now, Urashima felt very sorry for the poor tortoise, and made up his mind to rescue it. He spoke to the boys. "Look here, boys, you are treating that poor tortoise so badly that it will soon die." The boys, who were all of an age when children seem to delight in being cruel to animals, took no notice of Urashima's gentle reproof, but went on teasing it as before. One of the older boys answered, "Who cares whether it lives or dies? We do not. Here, boys, go on, go on." And they began to treat the poor tortoise more cruelly than ever. Urashima waited a moment, turning over in his mind what would be the best way to deal with the boys. He would try to persuade them to give the tortoise up to him. So he smiled at them and said, "I am sure you are all good, kind boys. Now won't you give me the tortoise? I should like to have it so much." "No, we won't give you the tortoise," said one of the boys. "Why should we? We caught it ourselves." "What you say is true," said Urashima. "But I do not ask you to give it to me for nothing. I will give you some money for it. In other words, the Oji-san uncle will buy it of you. Won't that do for you, my boys?" He held up the money to them, strung on a piece of string through a hole in the center of each coin. "Look, boys, you can buy anything you like with this money. You can do much more with this money than you can with that poor tortoise. See what good boys you are, to listen to me." The boys were not bad boys at all. They were only mischievous. And as Urashima spoke, they were won by his kind smile and gentle words, and began to be of his spirit, as they say in Japan. Gradually they all came up to him, the ringleader of the little band holding out the tortoise to him. "Very well, Oji-san, we will give you the tortoise if you will give us the money." And Urashima took the tortoise and gave the money to the boys, who, calling to each other, scampered away and were soon out of sight. Then Urashima stroked the tortoise's back, saying as he did so, "Oh, you poor thing, poor thing! There, you are safe now. They say that a stork lives for 1,000 years, but the tortoise for 10,000 years. You have the longest life of any creature in this world, and you were in great danger of having that precious life cut short by those cruel boys. Luckily I was passing by and saved you, and so life is still yours. Now I am going to take you back to your home, the sea, at once. Do not let yourself be caught again, for there might be no one to save you next time." All the time that the kind fisherman was speaking, he was walking quickly to the shore and out upon the rocks. Then, putting the tortoise into the water, he watched the animal disappear and turned homewards himself, for he was tired and the sun had set. The next morning, Urashima went out as usual in his boat. The weather was fine, and the sea and sky were both blue and soft in the tender haze of the summer morning. Urashima got into his boat and dreamily pushed out to sea, throwing his line as he did so. He soon passed the other fishing boats and left them behind him till they were lost to sight in the distance. And his boat drifted further and further out upon the blue waters. Somehow, he knew not why, he felt unusually happy that morning, and he could not help wishing that, like the tortoise he set free the day before, he had thousands of years to live instead of his own short span of human life. He was suddenly startled from his reverie by hearing his own name called, "Urashima! Urashima!" Clear as a bell and soft as the summer wind, the name floated over the sea. He stood up and looked in every direction, thinking that one of the other boats had overtaken him. But gaze as he might over the wide expanse of water, near or far there was no sign of a boat, so the voice could not have come from any human being. Startled, and wondering who or what it was that had called him so clearly, he looked in all directions round about him and saw that, without his knowing it, a tortoise had come to the side of the boat. Urashima saw with surprise that it was the very tortoise he had rescued the day before. "Well, Mr. Tortoise," said Urashima, "was it you who called my name just now?" The tortoise nodded its head several times and said, "Yes, it was I. Yesterday in your honorable shadow, Okage-sama-de, my life was saved, and I have come to offer you my thanks, and to tell you how grateful I am for your kindness to me." "Indeed," said Urashima, "that is very polite of you. Come up into the boat. I would offer you a smoke, but as you are a tortoise, doubtless you do not smoke." And the fisherman laughed at the joke. "He, laughed the tortoise. "Seiki, rice wine is my favorite refreshment, but I do not care for tobacco." "Indeed," said Urashima, "I regret very much that I have no sake in my boat to offer you, but come up and dry your back in the sun. Tortoises always love to do that." So the tortoise climbed into the boat, the fisherman helping him, and after an exchange of complimentary speeches, the tortoise said, Have you ever seen Rin Jin, the palace of the Dragon King of the Sea, Urashima?" The fisherman shook his head and replied, "No. Year after year, the sea has been my home. But though I have often heard of the Dragon King's realm under the sea, I have never yet set eyes on that wonderful place. It must be very far away, if it exists at all. Is that really so? You have never seen the Sea King's palace? Then you have missed seeing one of the most wonderful sights in the whole universe. It is far away at the bottom of the sea, but if I take you there, we shall soon reach the place. If you would like to see the Sea King's land, I will be your guide." "I should like to go there, certainly, and you are very kind to think of taking me. But you must remember that I am only a poor mortal and have not the power of swimming like a sea creature such as you are." Before the fisherman could say more, the tortoise stopped him, saying, "What? You need not swim yourself. If you will ride on my back, I will take you without any trouble on your part." "But," said Urashima, "how is it possible for me to ride on your small back? It may seem absurd to you, but I assure you that you can do so. Try at once. Just come and get on my back, and see if it is as impossible as you think." As the tortoise finished speaking, Urashima looked at its shell, and, strange to say, he saw that the creature had suddenly grown so big that a man could easily sit on its back. "This is strange indeed," said Urashima. "Then, Mr. Tortoise, with your kind permission, I will get on your back." "Dokuisho, Tufu," he exclaimed as he jumped on. "Tufu. All right, only used by lower classes." The tortoise, with an unmoved face, as if this strange proceeding were quite an ordinary event, said, "Now we will set out at our leisure." And with these words he leapt into the sea with Urashima on his back. Down through the water the tortoise dived. For a long time these two strange companions rowed through the sea. Urashima never grew tired, nor his clothes moist with the water. At last, far away in the distance, a magnificent gate appeared, and behind the gate, the long, sloping roofs of a palace on the horizon. "That looks like the gate of some large palace just appearing. Mr. Tortoise, can you tell what that place is we can now see?" "That is the great gate of the Rinjin Palace. The large roof that you see behind the gate is the Sea King's palace itself." "Then we have at last come to the realm of the Sea King and to his palace," said Urashima. "Yes, indeed," answered the tortoise. "And don't you think we have come very quickly?" And while he was speaking, the tortoise reached the side of the gate. "And here we are, and you must please walk from here." The tortoise now went in front, and speaking to the gatekeeper said, "This is Urashima Taro, from the country of Japan. I have had the honor of bringing him as a visitor to this kingdom. Please show him the way." Then the gatekeeper, who was a fish, at once led the way through the gate before them. The red bream, the flounder, the sole, the cuttlefish, and all the chief vassals of the Dragon King of the Sea now came out with courtly bows to welcome the stranger. "Urashima-sama! Urashima-sama! Welcome to the Sea Palace, the home of the Dragon King of the Sea. Thrice welcome are you, having come from such a distant country. And you, Mr. Tortoise, we are greatly indebted to you for all your trouble in bringing Urashima here." Then, turning again to Urashima, they said, "Please follow us this way." And from here the whole band of fishes became his guides. Urashima, being only a poor fisher lad, did not know how to behave in a palace, but, strange though it was all to him, he did not feel ashamed or embarrassed, but followed his kind guides quite calmly where they led to the inner palace. When he reached the portals, a beautiful princess with her attendant maidens came out to welcome him. She was more beautiful than any human being, and was robed in flowing garments of red and soft green like the underside of a wave, and golden threads glimmered through the folds of her gown. Her lovely black hair streamed over her shoulders in the fashion of a king's daughter many hundreds of years ago, and when she spoke, her voice sounded like music over the water. Urashima was lost in wonder while he looked upon her, and he could not speak. Then he remembered that he ought to bow, but before he could make a low obeisance, the princess took him by the hand and led him to a beautiful hall and to the seat of honor at the upper end, and bade him be seated. "Urashima Taro, it gives me the highest pleasure to welcome you to my father's kingdom," said the princess. "Yesterday you set free a tortoise, and I have sent for you to thank you for saving my life, for I was that tortoise. Now, if you like, you shall live here forever in the land of eternal youth, where summer never dies and where sorrow never comes. And I will be your bride, if you will, and we will live together happily forever afterwards." And as Urashima listened to her sweet words and gazed upon her lovely face, his heart was filled with a great wonder and joy, and he answered her, wondering if it was not all a dream. "Thank you 1,000 times for your kind speech. There is nothing I could wish for more than to be permitted to stay here with you in this beautiful land, of which I have often heard, but have never seen to this day. Beyond all words, this is the most wonderful place I have ever seen." While he was speaking, a train of fishes appeared, all dressed in ceremonial trailing garments. One by one, silently and with stately steps, they entered the hall, bearing on coral trays delicacies of fish and seaweed, such as no one can dream of, and this wondrous feast was set before the bride and bridegroom. The bridal was celebrated with dazzling splendor, and in the Sea King's realm there was great rejoicing. As soon as the young pair had pledged themselves in the wedding cup of wine, 3 times 3, music was played, and songs were sung, and fishes with silver scales and golden tails stepped in from the waves and danced. Urashima enjoyed himself with all his heart. Never in his whole life had he sat down to such a marvelous feast. When the feast was over, the princes asked the bridegroom if he would like to walk through the palace and see all there was to be seen. Then the happy fisherman, following his bride, the Sea King's daughter, was shown all the wonders of that enchanted land where youth and joy go hand in hand, and neither time nor age can touch them. The palace was built of coral and adorned with pearls, and the beauties and wonders of the place were so great that the tongue fails to describe them. But to Urashima, more wonderful than the palace was the garden that surrounded it. Here was to be seen at one time the scenery of the 4 different seasons. The beauties of summer and winter, spring and autumn, were displayed to the wondering visitor at once. First, when he looked to the east, the plum and cherry trees were seen in full bloom. The nightingales sang in the pink avenues, and butterflies flitted from flower to flower. Looking to the south, all the trees were green in the fullness of summer, and the day, cicala and the night cricket chirruped loudly. Looking to the west, the autumn maples were ablaze like a sunset sky, and the chrysanthemums were in perfection. Looking to the north, the change made Urashima start, for the ground was silver white with snow, and trees and bamboos were also covered with snow, and the pond was thick with ice. And each day there were new joys and new wonders for Urashima, and so great was his happiness that he forgot everything, even the home he had left behind, and his parents, and his own country. And 3 days passed without his even thinking of all he had left behind. Then his mind came back to him, and he remembered who he was, and that he did not belong to this wonderful land or the Sea King's palace, and he said to himself, "Oh dear, I must not stay on here, for I have an old father and mother at home. What can have happened to them all this time? How anxious they must have been these days when I did not return as usual. I must go back at once without letting one more day pass." And he began to prepare for the journey in great haste. Then he went to his beautiful wife, the princess, and bowing low before her, he said, "Indeed, I have been very happy with you for a long time, Otohime-sama," for that was her name, "and you have been kinder to me than any words can tell. But now I must say goodbye. I must go back to my old parents." Then Otohime-sama began to weep, and said softly and sadly, "Is it not well with you here, Urashima, that you wish to leave me so soon? Where is the haste? Stay with me yet another day only." But Urashima had remembered his old parents, and in Japan the duty to parents is stronger than everything else, stronger even than pleasure or love, and he would not be persuaded, but answered, "Indeed, I must go." "Do not think that I wish to leave you. It is not that. I must go and see my old parents. Let me go for one day, and I will come back to you." "Then," said the princess sorrowfully, "there is nothing to be done. I will send you back today to your father and mother, and instead of trying to keep you with me one more day, I shall give you this as a token of our love. Please take it back with you." And she brought him a beautiful lacquer box tied about with a silken cord and tassels of red silk. Urashima had received so much from the princess already that he felt some compunction in taking the gift, and said, "It does not seem right for me to take yet another gift from you after all the many favors I have received at your hands, but because it is your wish I will do so." And then he added, "Tell me, what is this box?" "That," answered the princess, "is the Tamete Bako box of the jewel hand, and it contains something very precious. You must not open this box, whatever happens. If you open it, something dreadful will happen to you. Now promise me that you will never open this box." And Urashima promised that he would never open the box, whatever happened. Then, bidding goodbye to Otohime-sama, he went down to the seashore, the princess and her attendants following him. And there he found a large tortoise waiting for him. He quickly mounted the creature's back and was carried away over the shining sea into the east. He looked back to wave his hand to Otohime-sama, till at last he could see her no more. And the land of the Sea King and the roofs of the wonderful palace were lost in the far, far distance. Then, with his face turned eagerly towards his own land, he looked for the rising of the blue hills on the horizon before him. At last the tortoise carried him into the bay he knew so well, and to the shore from whence he had set out. He stepped onto the shore and looked about him while the tortoise rowed away back to the Sea King's realm. But what is the strange fear that seizes Urashima as he stands and looks about him? Why does he gaze so fixedly at the people that pass him by? And why do they in turn stand and look at him? The shore is the same, and the hills are the same, but the people that he sees walking past him have very different faces to those he had known so well before. Wondering what it can mean, he walks quickly towards his old home. Even that looks different, but a house stands on the spot, and he calls out, "Father, I have just returned." And he was about to enter when he saw a strange man coming out. "Perhaps my parents have moved while I have been away and have gone somewhere else," was the fisherman's thought. Somehow he began to feel strangely anxious. He could not tell why. "Excuse me," said he to the man who was staring at him, "but till within the last few days I have lived in this house. My name is Urashima Taro. Where have my parents gone whom I left here?" A very bewildered expression came over the face of the man, and, still gazing intently on Urashima's face, he said, "What? Are you Urashima Taro?" Yes, said the fisherman. I am Urashima Taro. Ha ha, laughed the man. You must not make such jokes. It is true that once upon a time a man called Urashima Taro did live in this village. But that is a story 300 years old. He could not possibly be alive now. When Urashima heard these strange words, he was frightened and said, Please, please, you must not joke with me. I am greatly perplexed. I am really Urashima Taro, and I certainly have not lived 300 years. Till 4 or 5 days ago, I lived on this spot. Tell me what I want to know without more joking, please. But the man's face grew more and more grave, and he answered, You may or may not be Urashima Taro. I don't know. But the Urashima Taro of whom I have heard is a man who lived 300 years ago. Perhaps you are his spirit, come to revisit your old home? Why do you mock me? Said Urashima. I am no spirit, I am a living man. Do you not see my feet? And Don. He stamped on the ground, first with one foot and then with the other to show the man. Japanese ghosts have no feet. But Urashima Taro lived 300 years ago. That is all I know. It is written in the village chronicles, persisted the man, who could not believe what the fisherman said. Urashima was lost in bewilderment and trouble. He stood looking all around him, terribly puzzled, and indeed something in the appearance of everything was different to what he remembered before he went away, and the awful feeling came over him that what the man said was perhaps true. He seemed to be in a strange dream. The few days he had spent in the Sea King's palace beyond the sea had not been days at all. They had been hundreds of years, and in that time his parents had died and all the people he had ever known, and the village had written down his story. There was no use in staying here any longer. He must get back to his beautiful wife beyond the sea. He made his way back to the beach, carrying in his hand the box which the princess had given him. But which was the way? He could not find it alone. Suddenly he remembered the box, the tamate bako. The princess told me when she gave me the box never to open it, that it contained a very precious thing. But now that I have no home, now that I have lost everything that was dear to me here, and my heart grows thin with sadness, at such a time, if I open the box, surely I shall find something that will help me, something that will show me the way back to my beautiful princess over the sea. There is nothing else for me to do now. Yes, I will open the box and look in. And so his heart consented to this act of disobedience, and he tried to persuade himself that he was doing the right thing in breaking his promise. Slowly, very slowly, he untied the red silk cord. Slowly and wonderingly he lifted the lid of the precious box. And what did he find? Strange to say, only a beautiful little purple cloud rose out of the box in 3 soft wisps. For an instant it covered his face and wavered over him as if loath to go, and then it floated away like vapor over the sea. Urashima, who had been till that moment like a strong and handsome youth of 24, suddenly became very, very old. His back doubled up with age, his hair turned snowy white, his face wrinkled, and he fell down dead on the beach. Poor Urashima! Because of his disobedience, he could never return to the Sea King's realm, or the lovely princess beyond the sea. Little children, never be disobedient to those who are wiser than you, for disobedience was the beginning of all the miseries and sorrows of life. The Tongue-Cut Sparrow. Long, long ago in Japan, there lived an old man and his wife. The old man was a good, kind-hearted, hard-working old fellow, but his wife was a regular crosspatch. who spoiled the happiness of her home by her scolding tongue. She was always grumbling about something from morning to night. The old man had for a long time ceased to take any notice of her crossness. He was out most of the day at work in the fields, and as he had no child, for his amusement when he came home, he kept a tame sparrow. He loved the little bird just as much as if she had been his child. When he came back at night after his hard day's work in the open air, it was his only pleasure to pet the sparrow, to talk to her, and to teach her little tricks, which she learned very quickly. The old man would open her cage and let her fly about the room, and they would play together. Then when supper time came, he always saved some tidbits from his meal with which to feed his little bird. Now one day, the old man went out to chop wood in the forest, and the old woman stopped at home to wash clothes. The day before, she had made some starch, and now, when she came to look for it, it was all gone. The bowl which she had filled full yesterday was quite empty. While she was wondering who could have used or stolen the starch, down flew the pet sparrow, and bowing her little feathered head, a trick which she had been taught by her master. The pretty bird chirped and said, "It is I who have taken the starch. I thought it was some food put out for me in that basin, and I ate it all. If I have made a mistake, I beg you to forgive me." Tweet, tweet, tweet. You see from this that the sparrow was a truthful bird, and the old woman ought to have been willing to forgive her at once when she asked her pardon so nicely. But not so. The old woman had never loved the sparrow, and had often quarrelled with her husband for keeping what she called a dirty bird about the house, saying that it only made extra work for her. Now she was only too delighted to have some cause of complaint against the pet. She scolded and even cursed the poor little bird for her bad behaviour, and not content with using these harsh, unfeeling words, in a fit of rage she seized the sparrow, who all this time had spread out her wings and bowed her head before the old woman, to show how sorry she was, and fetched the scissors and cut off the poor little bird's tongue. "I suppose you took my starch with that tongue? Now you may see what it is like to go without it." And with these dreadful words she drove the bird away, not caring in the least what might happen to it, and without the smallest pity for its suffering, so unkind was she. The old woman, after she had driven the sparrow away, made some more rice paste, grumbling all the time at the trouble, and after starching all her clothes, spread the things on boards to dry in the sun, instead of ironing them, as they do in England. In the evening, the old man came home. As usual, on the way back he looked forward to the time when he should reach his gate and see his pet come flying and chirping to meet him, ruffling out her feathers to show her joy, and, at last, coming to rest on his shoulder. But tonight the old man was very disappointed, for not even the shadow of his dear sparrow was to be seen. He quickened his steps, hastily drew off his straw sandals, and stepped on to the veranda. Still no sparrow was to be seen. He now felt sure that his wife, in one of her cross tempers, had shut the sparrow up in its cage. So he called her and said anxiously, "Where is Suzume-san, Miss Sparrow, today?" The old woman pretended not to know at first, and answered, "Your sparrow? I am sure I don't know. Now I come to think of it, I haven't seen her all the afternoon. I shouldn't wonder if the ungrateful bird had flown away and left you after all your petting." But at last, when the old man gave her no peace, but asked her again and again, insisting that she must know what had happened to his pet, she confessed all. She told him crossly how the sparrow had eaten the rice paste she had specially made for starching her clothes, and how, when the sparrow had confessed to what she had done, in great anger she had taken her scissors and cut out her tongue, and how finally she had driven the bird away and forbidden her to return to the house again. Then the old woman showed her husband the sparrow's tongue, saying, "Here is the tongue I cut off. Horrid little bird, why did it eat all my starch? How could you be so cruel? Oh, how could you so cruel?" was all that the old man could answer. He was too kind-hearted to punish his beshrew of a wife, but he was terribly distressed at what had happened to his poor little sparrow. "What a dreadful misfortune for my poor Suzume-san to lose her tongue," he said to himself. "She won't be able to chirp any more. And surely the pain of the cutting of it out in that rough way must have made her ill. Is there nothing to be done?" The old man shed many tears after his cross wife had gone to sleep. While he wiped away the tears with the sleeve of his cotton robe, a bright thought comforted him. He would go and look for the sparrow on the morrow. Having decided this, he was able to go to sleep at last. The next morning he rose early, as soon as ever the day broke, and snatching a hasty breakfast, started out over the hills and through the woods, stopping at every clump of bamboos to cry, "Where, oh where does my tongue-cut sparrow stay? Where, oh where does my tongue-cut sparrow stay?" He never stopped to rest for his noonday meal, and it was far on in the afternoon when he found himself near a large bamboo wood. Bamboo groves are the favorite haunts of sparrows, and there, sure enough, at the edge of the wood, he saw his own dear sparrow waiting to welcome him. He could hardly believe his eyes for joy, and ran forward quickly to greet her. She bowed her little head and went through a number of the tricks her master had taught her, to show her pleasure at seeing her old friend again. And, wonderful to relate, she could talk as of old. The old man told her how sorry he was for all that had happened, and inquired after her tongue, wondering how she could speak so well without it. Then the sparrow opened her beak and showed him that a new tongue had grown in place of the old one, and begged him not to think any more about the past, for she was quite well now. Then the old man knew that his sparrow was a fairy and no common bird. It would be difficult to exaggerate the old man's rejoicing now. He forgot all his troubles. He forgot even how tired he was, for he had found his lost sparrow, and instead of being ill and without a tongue as he had feared and expected to find her, she was well and happy and with a new tongue, and without a sign of the ill treatment she had received from his wife. And above all, she was a fairy. The sparrow asked him to follow her, and flying before him, she led him to a beautiful house in the heart of the bamboo grove. The old man was utterly astonished when he entered the house to find what a beautiful place it was. It was built of the whitest wood. The soft cream-coloured mats which took the place of carpets were the finest he had ever seen, and the cushions that the sparrow brought out for him to sit on were made of the finest silk and crepe. Beautiful vases and lacquer boxes adorned the tokonoma, one of every room. 1. An alcove where precious objects are displayed. The sparrow led the old man to the place of honour, and then, taking her place at a humble distance, she thanked him with many polite bows for all the kindness he had shown her for many long years. Then the lady sparrow, as we will now call her, introduced all her family to the old man. This done, her daughters, robed in dainty crepe gowns, brought in on beautiful old-fashioned trays a feast of all kinds of delicious foods, till the old man began to think he must be dreaming. In the middle of the dinner, some of the sparrow's daughters performed a wonderful dance, called the Suzume Odori, or the sparrow's dance, to amuse the guest. Never had the old man enjoyed himself so much. The hours flew by too quickly in this lovely spot, with all these fairy sparrows to wait upon him, and to feast him, and to dance before him. But the night came on, and the darkness reminded him that he had a long way to go, and must think about taking his leave and return home. He thanked his kind hostess for her splendid entertainment and begged her for his sake to forget all she had suffered at the hands of his cross old wife. He told the Lady Sparrow that it was a great comfort and happiness to him to find her in such a beautiful home, and to know that she wanted for nothing. It was his anxiety to know how she fared and what had really happened to her that had led him to seek her. Now he knew that all was well. He could return home with a light heart. If ever she wanted him for anything, she had only to send for him, and he would come at once. The Lady Sparrow begged him to stay and rest several days and enjoy the change. But the old man said he must return to his old wife, who would probably be cross at his not coming home at the usual time, and to his work, and therefore, much as he wished to do so, he could not accept her kind invitation. But now that he knew where the Lady Sparrow lived, he would come to see her whenever he had the time. When the Lady Sparrow saw that she could not persuade the old man to stay longer, she gave an order to some of her servants, and they at once brought in 2 boxes, one large and the other small. These were placed before the old man, and the Lady Sparrow asked him to choose whichever he liked for a present which she wished to give him. The old man could not refuse this kind proposal, and he chose the smaller box, saying, "I am now too old and feeble to carry the big and heavy box. As you are so kind as to say that I may take whichever I like, I will choose the small one, which will be easier for me to carry." Then the sparrows all helped him put it on his back, and went to the gate to see him off, bidding him good-bye with many bows, and entreating him to come again whenever he had the time. Thus the old man and his pet sparrow separated quite happily, the sparrow showing not the least ill will for all the unkindness she had suffered at the hands of the old wife. Indeed, she only felt sorrow for the old man, who had to put up with it all his life. When the old man reached home, he found his wife even crosser than usual, for it was late on in the night, and she had been waiting up for him for a long time. "Where have you been all this time?" she asked in a big voice. "Why do you come back so late?" The old man tried to pacify her by showing her the box of presents he had brought back with him, and then he told her of all that had happened to him, and how wonderfully he had been entertained at the sparrow's house. "Now let us see what is in the box," said the old man, not giving her time to grumble again. "You must help me open it." And they both sat down before the box and opened it. To their utter astonishment, they found the box filled to the brim with gold and silver coins and many other precious things. The mats of their little cottage fairly glittered as they took out the things one by one and put them down and handled them over and over again. The old man was overjoyed at the sight of the riches that were now his. Beyond his brightest expectations was the sparrow's gift, which would enable him to give up work and live in ease and comfort the rest of his days. He said, "Thanks to my good little sparrow, thanks to my good little sparrow," many times. But the old woman, after the first moments of surprise and satisfaction at the sight of the gold and silver were over, could not suppress the greed of her wicked nature. She now began to reproach the old man for not having brought home the big box of presents, for in the innocence of his heart he had told her how he had refused the large box of presents which the sparrows had offered him, preferring the smaller one, because it was light and easy to carry home. "You silly old man," said she, "why did you not bring the large box? Just think what we have lost. We might have had twice as much silver and gold as this." "You are certainly an old fool," she screamed, and then went to bed as angry as she could be. The old man now wished that he had said nothing about the big box, but it was too late. The greedy old woman, not contented with the good luck which had so unexpectedly befallen them and which she so little deserved, made up her mind, if possible, to get more. Early the next morning she got up and made the old man describe the way to the sparrow's house. When he saw what was in her mind, he tried to keep her from going, but it was useless. She would not listen to one word he said. It is strange that the old woman did not feel ashamed of going to see the sparrow after the cruel way she had treated her in cutting off her tongue in a fit of rage. But her greed to get the big box made her forget everything else. It did not even enter her thoughts that the sparrows might be angry with her, as indeed they were, and might punish her for what she had done. Ever since the Lady Sparrow had returned home in the sad plight in which they had first found her, weeping and bleeding from the mouth, her whole family and relations had done little else but speak of the cruelty of the old woman. How could she, they asked each other, inflict such a heavy punishment for such a trifling offence as that of eating some rice paste by mistake? They all loved the old man who was so kind and good and patient under all his troubles. But the old woman they hated, and they determined, if ever they had the chance, to punish her as she deserved. They had not long to wait. After walking for some hours, the old woman had at last found the bamboo grove which she had made her husband carefully describe, and now she stood before it crying out, "Where is the Tongue-Cut Sparrow's house? Where is the Tongue-Cut Sparrow's house?" At last she saw the eaves of the house peeping out from amongst the bamboo foliage. She hastened to the door and knocked loudly. When the servants told the Lady Sparrow that her old mistress was at the door asking to see her, she was somewhat surprised at the unexpected visit, after all that had taken place, and she wondered not a little at the boldness of the old woman in venturing to come to the house. The Lady Sparrow, however, was a polite bird, and so she went out to greet the old woman, remembering that she had once been her mistress. The old woman intended, however, to waste no time in words. She went right to the point without the least shame, and said, "You need not trouble to entertain me as you did my old man. I have come myself to get the box which he so stupidly left behind. I shall soon take my leave if you will give me the big box. That is all I want." The Lady Sparrow at once consented, and told her servant to bring out the big box. The old woman eagerly seized it and hoisted it on her back, and without even stopping to thank, the Lady Sparrow began to hurry homewards. The box was so heavy that she could not walk fast, much less run, as she would have liked to do, so anxious was she to get home and see what was inside the box. But she had often to sit down and rest herself by the way. While she was staggering along under the heavy load, her desire to open the box became too great to be resisted. She could wait no longer, for she supposed this big box to be full of gold and silver and precious jewels like the small one her husband had received. At last, this greedy and selfish old woman put down the box by the wayside and opened it carefully, expecting to gloat her eyes on a mine of wealth. What she saw, however, so terrified her that she nearly lost her senses. As soon as she lifted the lid, a number of horrible and frightful-looking demons bounced out of the box and surrounded her as if they intended to kill her. Not even in nightmares had she ever seen such horrible creatures as her much-coveted box contained. A demon with one huge eye right in the middle of its forehead came and glared at her. Monsters with gaping mouths looked as if they would devour her. A huge snake coiled and hissed about her, and a big frog hopped and croaked towards her. The old woman had never been so frightened in her life, and ran from the spot as fast as her quaking legs would carry her, glad to escape alive. When she reached home, she fell to the floor and told her husband with tears all that had happened to her, and how she had been nearly killed by the demons in the box. Then she began to blame the sparrow, but the old man stopped her at once, saying, "Don't blame the sparrow. It is your wickedness which has at last met with its reward. I only hope this may be a lesson to you in the future." The old woman said nothing more, and from that day she repented of her cross, unkind ways, and by degrees became a good old woman, so that her husband hardly knew her to be the same person. And they spent their last days together happily, free from want or care, spending carefully the treasure the old man had received from his pet, the tongue-cut sparrow. The White Hare and the Crocodiles. Long, long ago, when all the animals could talk, there lived in the province of Inaba in Japan a little white hare. His home was on the island of Oki, and just across the sea was the mainland of Inaba. Now the hare wanted very much to cross over to Inaba. Day after day he would go out and sit on the shore and look longingly over the water in the direction of Inaba. And day after day he hoped to find some way of getting across. One day, as usual, the hare was standing on the beach, looking towards the mainland across the water, when he saw a great crocodile swimming near the island. "This is very lucky," thought the hare. "Now I shall be able to get my wish. I will ask the crocodile to carry me across the sea." But he was doubtful whether the crocodile would consent to do what wanted. So he thought, instead of asking a favor, he would try to get what he wanted by a trick. So, with a loud voice, he called to the crocodile and said, "Oh, Mr. Crocodile, isn't it a lovely day?" The crocodile, who had come out all by itself that day to enjoy the bright sunshine, was just beginning to feel a bit lonely when the hare's cheerful greeting broke the silence. The crocodile swam nearer the shore, very pleased to hear someone speak. "I wonder who it was that spoke to me just now. Was it you, Mr. Hare? You must be very lonely all by yourself." "Oh, no, I am not at all lonely," said the hare. "But as it was such a fine day, I came out here to enjoy myself. Won't you stop and play with me a little while?" The crocodile came out of the sea and sat on the shore, and the two played together for some time. Then the hare said, "Mr. Crocodile, you live in the sea, and I live on this island, and we do not often meet, so I know very little about you. Tell me, do you think the number of your company is greater than mine?" "Of course, there are more crocodiles than hares," answered the crocodile. "Can you not see that for yourself? You live on this small island, while I live in the sea, which spreads through all parts of the world. So if I call together all the crocodiles who dwell in the sea, you hares will be as nothing compared to us." The crocodile was very conceited. The hare, who meant to play a trick on the crocodile, said, "Do you think it possible for you to call up enough crocodiles to form a line from this island across the sea to Inaba?" The crocodile thought for a moment and then answered, "Of course, it is possible." "Then do try," said the artful hare, "and I will count the number from here." The crocodile, who was very simple-minded, and who hadn't the least idea that the hare intended to play a trick on him, agreed to do what the hare asked, and said, "Wait a little while, I go back into the sea and call my company together." The crocodile plunged into the sea and was gone for some time. The hare, meanwhile, waited patiently on the shore. At last the crocodile appeared, bringing with him a large number of other crocodiles. "Look, Mr. Hare," said the crocodile, "it is nothing for my friends to form a line between here and Inaba. There are enough crocodiles to stretch from here even as far as China or India. Did you ever see so many crocodiles?" Then the whole company of crocodiles arranged themselves in the water so as to form a bridge between the island of Oki and the mainland of Inaba. When the hare saw the bridge of crocodiles, he said, "How splendid! I did not believe this was possible. Now let me count you all. To do this, however, with your permission, I must walk over on your backs to the other side, so please be so good as not to move, or else I shall fall into the sea and be drowned." So the hare hopped off the island onto the strange bridge of crocodiles, counting as he jumped from one crocodile's back to the other. "Please keep quite still, or I shall not be able to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Thus the cunning hare walked right across to the mainland of Inaba. Not content with getting his wish, he began to jeer at the crocodiles instead of thanking them, and said, as he leapt off the last one's back, "Oh, you stupid crocodiles! Now I have done with you." And he was just about to run away as fast as he could. But he did not escape so easily, for so soon as the crocodiles understood that this was a trick played upon them by the hare, so as to enable him to cross the sea, and that the hare was now laughing at them for their stupidity, they became furiously angry, and made up their minds to take revenge. So some of them ran after the hare and caught him. Then they all surrounded the poor little animal and pulled out all his fur. He cried out loudly and entreated them to spare him, but with each tuft of fur they pulled out, they said, "Serve you right." When the crocodiles had pulled out the last bit of fur, they threw the poor hare on the beach, and all swam away, laughing at what they had done. The hare was now in a pitiful plight. All his beautiful white fur had been pulled out, and his bare little body was quivering with pain and bleeding all over. He could hardly move, and all he could do was to lie on the beach quite helpless and weep over the misfortune that had befallen him, notwithstanding that it was his own fault that had brought all this misery and suffering upon the white hare of Inaba. Anyone seeing the poor little creature could not help feeling sorry for him in his sad condition, for the crocodiles had been very cruel in their revenge. Just at this time a number of men who looked like king's sons happened to pass by, and seeing the hare lying on the beach crying, stopped and asked what was the matter. The hare lifted up his head from between his paws and answered them, saying, "I had a fight with some crocodiles, but I was beaten, and they pulled out all my fur and left me to suffer here. That is why I am crying." Now one of these young men had a bad and spiteful disposition, but he feigned kindness and said to the hare, "I feel very sorry for you. If you will only try it, I know of a remedy which will cure your sore body. Go and bathe yourself in the sea, and then come and sit in the wind. This will make your fur grow again, and you will be just as you were before." Then all the young men passed on. The hare was very pleased, thinking that he had found a cure. He went and bathed in the sea, and then came out and sat where the wind could blow upon him. But as the wind blew and dried him, his skin became drawn and hardened, and the salt increased the pain so much that he rolled on the sand in his agony and cried aloud. Just then another king's son passed by, carrying a great bag on his back. He saw the hare and stopped and asked why he was crying so loudly. But the poor hare, remembering that he had been deceived by one very like the man who now spoke to him, did not answer, but continued to cry. But this man had a kind heart, and looked at the hare very pityingly and said, "You poor thing, I see that your fur is all pulled out, and that your skin is quite bare. Who can have treated you so cruelly?" When the hare heard these kind words, he felt very grateful to the man, and encouraged by his gentle manner, the hare told him all that had befallen him. The little animal hid nothing from his friend, but told him frankly how he had played a trick on the crocodiles, and how he had come across the bridge they had made, thinking that he wished to count their number, how he had jeered at them for their stupidity, and then how the crocodiles had revenged themselves on him. Then he went on to say how he had been deceived by a party of men who looked very like his kind friend, and the hare ended his long tale of woe by begging the man to give him some medicine that would cure him and make his fur grow again. When the hare had finished his story, the man was full of pity towards him and said, "I am very sorry for all you have suffered, but remember, it was only the consequence of the deceit you practiced on the crocodiles." "I know," answered the sorrowful hare, "but I have repented and made up my mind never to use deceit again. So I beg you to show me how I may cure my sore body and make the fur grow again." "Then I will tell you of a good remedy," said the man. "First go and bathe well in that pond over there and try to wash all the salt from your body. Then pick some of those kaba flowers that are growing near the edge of the water. Spread them on the ground and roll yourself on them. If you do this, the pollen will cause your fur to grow again, and you will be quite well in a little while." The hare was very glad to be told what to do, so kindly. He crawled to the pond pointed out to him, bathed well in it, and then picked the kapa flowers growing near the water and rolled himself on them. To his amazement, even while he was doing this, he saw his nice white fur growing again. The pain ceased, and he felt just as he had done before all his misfortunes. The hare was overjoyed at his quick recovery, and went hopping joyfully towards the young man who had so helped him, and kneeling down at his feet said, "I cannot express my thanks for all you have done for me. It is my earnest wish to do something for you in return. Please tell me who you are. I am no king's son as you think me. I am a fairy, and my name is Okuni Nushi no Mikoto," answered the man. "And those beings who passed here before me are my brothers. They have heard of a beautiful princess called Yakami, who lives in this province of Inaba, and they are on their way to find her and to ask her to marry one of them. But on this expedition, I am only an attendant, so I am walking behind them with this great big bag on my back." The hare humbled himself before this great fairy Okuni Nushi no Mikoto, whom many in that part of the land worshipped as a god. "Oh, I did not know that you were Okuni Nushi no Mikoto. How kind you have been to me. It is impossible to believe that that unkind fellow who sent me to bathe in the sea is one of your brothers. I am quite sure that the princess, whom your brothers have gone to seek, will refuse to be the bride of any of them, and will prefer you for your goodness of heart. I am quite sure that you will win her heart without intending to do so, and she will ask to be your bride." Okuni Nushi no Mikoto took no notice of what the hare said, but bidding the little animal goodbye, went on his way quickly and soon overtook his brothers. He found them just entering the princess's gate. Just as the hare had said, the princess could not be persuaded to become the bride of any of the brothers, but when she looked at the kind brother's face, she went straight up to him and said, "To you I give myself." And so they were married. This is the end of the story. Okuni Nushi no Mikoto is worshipped by the people in some parts of Japan as a god, and the hare has become famous as the White Hare of Inaba. But what became of the crocodiles nobody knows.